The metal tag is cold against your chest before you even understand why they placed it there. The room smells of burnt oil, damp stone, and something sharper beneath it. Hot copper, perhaps, or electricity. Somewhere behind you, gears grind slowly through the darkness. A machine clicks once. Then again. You hear another man breathing nearby. Fast, afraid, but no one speaks. A rough hand tightens around the back of your neck and pushes you forward into the light. The chair beneath you vibrates faintly as if something deep below the floor has already started moving. And then you notice the others. Not the men watching you, the men avoiding your eyes. That is the moment you understand something is wrong. Because people only look away when they know what happens next. In Victorian Britain, inventors built machines the public was never meant to see. Some disappeared because they failed. Others disappeared for very different reasons. And tonight, you are here, inside one of those stories. This is not a horror story. This is history. And this is only one story. There are many more like this, hidden in history. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, you might want to stay. Stories like this happen more often than you think. The machine beneath the floor. The metal tag touches your chest before anyone tells you your name. It is not pinned gently. It is pressed into the wool of your coat by a thumb stained black with oil, then fastened with a small iron clasp that bites through the cloth. The number stamped into it is uneven, as if the man who made it was working too quickly or too afraid to hold the punch steady. 47. That is all they give you. Not a name, not a reason, just a number. The room around you is almost dark, except for the dull yellow breath of gas lamps fixed high along the brick walls. Their flames tremble whenever the great machine turns beneath the floorboards. You feel it before you hear it. A vibration, low, patient, like something alive sleeping under the building. Then the sound comes. A slow iron click. A pause. Another click. Somewhere behind the wall, a belt begins to move. Leather over wheel, wheel over shaft, shaft into the dark. You smell hot metal, burnt oil, damp stone. And under all of it, something sharper. Electricity. A hand settles on the back of your neck. Not hard, not yet. Just enough to remind you that you are not standing here by choice. Across the room, men in dark coats watch from the edges of the light. Some hold notebooks, some hold tools. One holds a pocket watch and never looks at your face. The others stand behind you in silence. Other men, other numbers. You try to turn toward them, but the hand tightens. No need to look back, someone says quietly. And that is when you understand the first rule of this place. The people who are brought here do not get to ask questions. The machine clicks again, closer this time. Or perhaps you are closer to it, you cannot tell. A narrow chair waits in the center of the room. It is made of dark wood, polished by use at the arms, scratched near the legs, and fitted with straps that have been buckled and unbuckled too many times. One of the men gestures toward it, not angrily, not with excitement, almost politely, as if this is normal. As if every night in London men are numbered, guided into hidden rooms, and seated beneath machines that no newspaper ever mentions. And this is only one story. There are many more like this, hidden in history. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, you might want to stay. The hand on your neck pushes you forward. One step, then another. The floorboards bend under your boots. The chair waits. The machine breathes beneath it. And somewhere in the darkness above your head, a tiny glass bulb begins to glow. Not bright enough to light the room, only bright enough to show you the straps. You sit because the men expect you to sit. You sit because the door behind you is closed. You sit because the others are watching. And because part of you still believes there must be a reasonable explanation. Victorian Britain loved reasonable explanations. It was an age of diagrams, patents, lectures, exhibitions, laboratories, public demonstrations, medical theaters, and men who believed that every mystery in the human body could be solved if only enough pressure, heat, current, gas, steam, or machinery were applied to it. They measured skulls. They photographed the dead. They bottled organs. They built devices to correct posture, calm nerves, improve breathing, stop madness, revive the drowned, straighten spines, cure hysteria, restore hair, strengthen muscles, prevent premature burial, and even communicate with the unseen. Some inventions became the future. Some became jokes, Some vanished quietly, but a few disappeared for a reason. Not because they were useless, because they worked just enough to frighten the people who saw them. The strap goes over your left wrist first. The man fastening it does not look cruel. That is worse. Cruel men enjoy what they do. This man works like a clerk balancing accounts. Pull, thread, buckle, tighten, then the right wrist, then the chest. The leather smells old. Sweat has lived in it before you, fear too. You can feel places where fingernails have scratched the chair arms, small crescent marks in the varnish. You notice them because your hands are close to them now, because your own fingers want to make the same marks. A doctor steps into the light. At least you think he is a doctor. He has the coat of one, the hands of one, the calm face of a man trained to see pain as information. He carries a small mirror and holds it beneath your nose. You breathe onto the glass. A faint cloud appears. He nods. Alive. Then he takes your pulse. Strong enough, he says. Strong enough for what? No one answers. That is the second rule of the room. Every answer arrives too late. Above you, metal arms hang from a circular frame fixed to the ceiling. Thin rods, brass joints, wires wrapped in cloth, glass tubes, clamps no larger than fingers. It does not look like one invention. It looks like several inventions forced into one body. A machine made from other machines. A thing assembled from ambition. Someone turns a wheel behind you. The frame lowers a little, not much. Only enough for the cold shadow of it to fall across your face. Your breathing changes. You try to slow it, you fail. The man with the pocket watch finally looks up. Begin with the mild current, he says. Mild, that word should comfort you, it does not. A metal contact touches your temple. Cold. Then another behind your ear. Someone tightens a screw. The pressure is small, almost delicate, but there is something intimate about it that makes your stomach turn. A machine should not touch a man so carefully. A machine should not know where to place its fingers. The gas lamps hiss. The belt behind the wall speeds up, and for one terrible second, you hear another sound beneath it. A voice, not from the men, not from the room, from below. A muffled cry under the floorboards. Your eyes snap toward the boards near the chair leg. The doctor notices. What did you hear? He asks. You do not answer. Because the sound is gone. Because the machine is louder now. Because the men around you have gone very still. That is the first mystery of the night. Not the straps, not the wires, not the number on your chest. The sound from beneath the floor. A human sound. A sound that should not be there. And before you can decide whether you imagined it, the doctor places 2 fingers under your chin and turns your face back toward the machine. Look forward, he says. So you look forward, into the brass, into the glass, into the small blue spark waiting inside the tube. London is above you somewhere. Real London. The London of wet cobbles, coughing horses, coal smoke, church bells, gin shops, omnibus wheels, newspapers, river fog, policemen's lanterns, and windows glowing dimly through the black evening. Men are walking home with bread under their arms. Women are pulling shawls tight against the cold. Children are being called inside. Somewhere a clock tower is striking the hour, and none of them know this room exists. That is how history hides its darkest inventions. Not in castles, not in ruins, but behind ordinary doors, under workshops, inside hospitals, in lecture rooms after the respectable audience has gone home, in back rooms where the gas is turned low and the notebooks remain open. The Victorian world was not only a world of steam engines and railways. It was also a world of experiments on breath, nerves, electricity, shock, restraint, sleep, death, and fear. People wanted miracles. Inventors promised them. And sometimes the price of a miracle was a living body. Tonight, that body is yours. The doctor raises one hand. The room waits. The machine clicks. Once. Twice. Then the current enters you. Not like lightning, not at first. More like 1,000 tiny insects waking under your skin. Your jaw tightens. Your fingers curl against the straps. A taste of metal blooms on your tongue. The men in the shadows begin writing. Someone whispers, facial response immediate. Facial response. That is what they call your fear. The current grows, your right eye waters. The muscles near your cheek pull without permission. Your own face betrays you. It moves for them. One of the observers leans closer. Remarkable, he says. Remarkable. You want to spit the word back at him, but your jaw will not obey. The doctor watches your face as if reading a map. Again, says the man with the pocket watch. The spark jumps. Your body lifts against the straps. Not far, just enough for the chair to creak. Behind you, one of the numbered men makes a sound in his throat, a small sound, the sound of someone who understands he may be next. And there, in that instant, the room changes. You are no longer simply afraid of what they are doing to you. You are afraid that this has happened before. Many times. To men whose names were removed and replaced with numbers. To men whose pain became notes in a ledger. To men who walked into history, only to vanish between one paragraph and the next. The machine pauses. Smoke rises faintly from the contact near your temple. The doctor smells it and frowns. Not with concern, with curiosity, as if the burning skin has given him a better question. He removes the contact and adjusts the wire. You see, he says to the others, the difficulty is not producing a reaction. He glances at you. The difficulty is controlling it. Controlling it. Not healing, not helping, controlling. Stories like this happen more often than you think. And not all of them began in hidden rooms. Some began in public halls, before cheering crowds. Some began in respectable hospitals. Some began with newspaper advertisements promising relief from pain, exhaustion, madness, deformity, or death itself. And some began with an invention so strange that even its own century did not know whether to celebrate it or bury it. The doctor lowers the frame another inch. The metal arms are closer now. One passes near your left eye. Not touching. Almost. You can see your reflection bent in the polished brass. A terrified man. A numbered man. A man still trying to understand whether he is a patient, a criminal, a volunteer, or a specimen. The doctor lifts the mirror again. This time, he does not place it beneath your nose. He places it near your mouth and watches the breath cloud the glass. Then he says something that chills you more than the metal. Good. We have not gone too far. Not yet. The words remain in the air. Not yet. You swallow. The strap across your chest creaks. The machine beneath the floor turns again. And then you hear it. The sound below. Clearer now. Not a cry. Not exactly. 3 knocks. Slow. From under the boards. Knock. 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 Every man in the room hears it. No one writes. No one speaks. Even the doctor freezes. For the first time, his calm face changes. Only slightly, but enough. He knows what that sound is. Or he thinks he does. The man with the pocket watch closes it. Continue, he says. The doctor does not move. Continue, the man repeats. And now you understand something else. The machine above you is not the only invention in this building. Something is below, something they built, something they locked away, something that can still knock. The frame lowers again. A metal arm stops beside your cheek. The blue spark brightens. The doctor's hand hovers near the switch. Your eyes burn. Your breath fogs the little mirror. And beneath the floor, whatever is down there knocks once more. Louder. This time, from directly under your chair. The age that believed everybody could be fixed. The knocking stops. Not fades, stops. As if whatever waits beneath the floor has heard the order to be silent. For several seconds, no one in the room moves. The doctor keeps his hand near the switch. His fingers are pale in the gaslight. The man with the pocket watch stands perfectly still, his face turned not toward you, but toward the boards beneath your chair. That frightens you more than the machine, because men of science are trained to explain things quickly. A sound, a symptom, a reaction, a defect in the apparatus, a misfiring wire, a loose pipe, a settling beam. But none of them explain this. Not yet. Then the doctor breathes in through his nose and says quietly, "It is only pressure." The man with the pocket watch does not answer. "It is only pressure in the lower chamber," the doctor repeats, louder this time, as though the sentence is for the room, not for himself. One of the observers writes the words down. Only pressure. That is how terrible things are made smaller. A cry becomes pressure. A wound becomes response. A man becomes number 47. The machine above you hums. The metal near your cheek trembles. The doctor turns the dial back with care, and the spark inside the tube shrinks from blue to dull white. "Remove the current," says the man with the pocket watch. For one moment, hope passes through you. Not freedom, you are too far from freedom, but a smaller hope. The hope that they will loosen the straps, that they will step away, that someone will admit the experiment has gone wrong. The doctor lifts the contact from your temple. The skin beneath it burns. Your jaw aches where your muscles were forced to move. Your tongue still tastes of coins. Your hands are wet inside the restraints, but the room is cold. The man unfastens the strap across your chest. Not the wrists, only the chest. Enough for you to breathe deeper, not enough for you to run. "Stand him," says the man with the pocket watch. Two assistants lift you by the arms. Your knees do not trust the floor. For a second, the world tilts. Gas lamps, brick wall, notebooks, brass frame, dark coats, all sliding sideways like scenery in a theater. Then your boots touch wood. The floor vibrates. Still, not as strongly, but there, under everything. The doctor watches your face. "You heard it before the others," he says. It is not a question. You say nothing. He leans closer. His breath smells faintly of tobacco and cloves. "Some men are sensitive to vibration," he continues, "to current, to suggestion. The nerves can produce many impressions." Suggestion. That is another useful word, a word that can erase almost anything. A voice under the floor, a knocking in the dark, a man who should not be there. The assistant turns you toward a narrow passage beside the laboratory wall. It is half hidden behind a hanging curtain of dark oilcloth. When they pull it aside, the smell changes at once. Less hot metal, more damp, more stone, more something closed for too long. You glance back at the chair. Another numbered man is being brought forward. He is older than you. Gray beard, working hands. His tag reads 52. He sees the marks on your temple and immediately looks away. You want to warn him. You want to say, "Listen for the floor." You want to say, "Do not let them call it pressure." But the assistant pushes you into the passage before you can speak, and the curtain falls behind you. The corridor is low and narrow, built of brick, with pipes running along one side. Water sweats from the walls in tiny beads. The gaslight here is weaker, the flames turn down to blue points behind dirty glass. Every few steps, iron doors break the passage. Some have numbers painted on them, some have no handles on your side. From behind one, you hear a clicking sound, rapid and delicate, like teeth tapping together. From behind another, nothing at all. The assistant walks ahead of you with a lamp. He is young. You notice this because his hands shake. Not much, but enough. "You have worked here long?" you ask. He does not answer. The other assistant, older, broader, with a scar across one ear, gives a dry laugh. "No one works here long." The young one shoots him a look. The older man shrugs. "What, he'll know soon enough." The words settle into the corridor. He'll know soon enough. That becomes the next question. Know what? In Victorian London, knowledge had become a kind of hunger. The century believed it could improve everything. Streets could be widened, sewers could be rebuilt, trains could cut through hills, telegraph wires could carry messages faster than horses, faster than ships, faster than any voice had traveled before. If something was slow, it could be accelerated. If something was dirty, it could be disinfected. If something was weak, it could be strengthened. If something was hidden, it could be exposed. And if the human body suffered, perhaps it too could be corrected like a faulty mechanism. That belief was not always cruel. Sometimes it saved lives. Anesthesia changed surgery. Antiseptic methods began to change hospitals. Better instruments, better charts, better public health works. These were not fantasies. They were real, hard-won improvements in a world full of pain. But progress has a shadow. And in the 19th century, that shadow often fell across the body of the poor. Because the poor were available. The poor entered hospitals when they had nowhere else to go. The poor answered advertisements when they needed coins. The poor sold hair, teeth, labor, bone, blood, time, silence. And sometimes, whether by pressure, desperation, deception, or law, they became material for someone else's experiment. You are led into a smaller room. No machine waits here. Only a bench, a basin, a shelf of bottles, a cracked mirror fixed to the wall. The assistant sits you down and gives you water in a tin cup. Your hands shake so badly that half of it spills down your coat. The young assistant notices the number tag and looks quickly at the floor. Why 47? You ask. He swallows. They started counting again. Again. The older assistant closes the door. Enough, he says. But the young one has already said too much. Started counting again. So there was an earlier list, earlier numbers, earlier men. You look toward the wall, toward the direction of the laboratory. A muffled sound travels through the bricks, a cry, short, then the heavy click of the machine. The man with the gray beard has begun. The young assistant flinches. The older one does not. That tells you which of them has been here longer. On the shelf near your shoulder, labels are pasted to glass bottles. Tincture of opium, camphor, ether, chloroform, nitrate of silver, carbolic. You know some of these names. Everyone in London knows some of them. They appear in advertisements, in chemists' windows, in newspapers promising relief from coughs, nerves, sleeplessness, melancholy, toothache, women's complaints, weakness, exhaustion, and every discomfort that can be turned into a sale. Victorian medicine was not one thing. It was a battlefield. Some doctors were careful, some were brilliant. Some were brave enough to challenge old habits and save thousands of lives. Others were showmen. Others were fools with degrees. Others were businessmen wearing the language of science like a clean coat. And around them grew a forest of inventions. Electric belts, magnetic corsets, galvanic brushes, mechanical massage devices, breathing machines, vapor inhalers, spinal supports, patent chairs, nerve stimulators, devices to wake the drowned, devices to straighten the crooked, devices to calm the insane, devices to measure the skull and pretend the soul had left marks on bone. Some were harmless, some were ridiculous, some were useful by accident, and some were dangerous because they stood at the edge of something real. Electricity was real, anesthesia was real, photography was real, steam power was real, chemistry was real. The danger came when men who barely understood these powers decided they understood the human body well enough to use them. The older assistant takes a cloth, dips it in the basin, and wipes the burned mark on your temple. The sting makes you gasp. Hold still, he says. You heard the knocking, you whisper. His hand stops, only for half a second. Then he keeps wiping. There are pipes below. No pipe knocks back. He looks at you then, fully. His eyes are tired, not cruel, tired. That depends what is inside it. The young assistant whispers his name sharply. Mr. Vale. The older man, Vale, turns away. But the sentence is already inside you. That depends what is inside it. A pipe, a chamber, a lower room, a thing built beneath the floor. The laboratory door thunders open somewhere down the corridor. Footsteps approach quickly. The young assistant moves to the room's entrance. A man appears there, breathing hard. Number 52 failed. No one asks what failed means. The young assistant goes pale. Vale puts down the cloth. Alive? The man at the door hesitates. That hesitation is answer enough, but then he says, for now, for now. Another phrase that opens like a trap door. A few minutes later, they bring the gray-bearded man past your room. You see him only briefly through the half-open door. His head hangs sideways, his eyes are open. One assistant supports him beneath the arms while another presses cloth to the side of his neck. There is no visible blood, no gore, nothing dramatic enough for a theater. That makes it worse. He looks not injured, but emptied, as if the machine has taken something invisible and left the body behind. His number tag swings against his chest. 52. Then he is gone. The door closes. The room becomes small again. You hear your own breathing. The gas flame ticks behind the glass. Vale washes his hands slowly, too slowly. What did it do to him, you ask? He does not answer. Was it electricity? Still nothing. Was it the machine? Vale dries his hands on a cloth and says, machines do what men ask them to do. That is not an answer. Or perhaps it is the only answer that matters. The young assistant looks toward the corridor, then toward you. They are not testing only electricity, he says. Vale turns sharply. But this time the young man does not stop. They call it restoration. The word should be gentle. It is not. Restoration. To restore is to bring back what was lost. Breath, strength, memory, movement, life. And now the knocking beneath the floor feels different. Not like warning, like evidence. You remember the mirror under your nose, the doctor checking your breath, the phrase, strong enough, the phrase, not too far, the phrase, restoration. A Victorian invention that vanished for a reason does not vanish because it fails every time. It vanishes because once, perhaps only once, it comes close enough to success that everyone in the room understands the cost. The young assistant lowers his voice. There was a demonstration last winter, he says. Not here, before this place, before the new chamber. Vale says, silence. But the young man is looking at you now, not him, as if he needs someone outside the room to know. They used a dog first, then a convict's body, then Vale strikes the shelf with his palm. Bottles rattle. That is enough. The young assistant steps back. In the sudden quiet, the muffled laboratory sounds continue. Men moving, metal turning, a chair being dragged, someone coughing. Then faintly, from below, knock. Once. Only once. The three of you freeze. Vale closes his eyes. Not in confusion, in recognition. The young assistant whispers, "It's awake." Vale opens his eyes. Do not use that word. Awake. Now the story has a shape. Not a full shape, not yet, but enough to frighten you. Something below the floor has been subjected to restoration. Something the men upstairs prefer to call pressure, vibration, mechanism, failure, anything but life. Something that can knock. Something they do not want you to hear. You stand suddenly. The wrist straps have been removed, but your legs are still weak. The room tilts again. Vale steps toward you. Sit down. You back away. The door is behind him. The cracked mirror is behind you. In it, for one moment, you see yourself as the room sees you. A man with a number on his chest, a burn at his temple, a face too pale, eyes too wide. A man who entered as a subject and is beginning to become a witness. That is more dangerous. Subjects can be restrained. Witnesses must be silenced. Vale sees the thought pass through your face. His voice lowers. You are thinking of running. You say nothing. There is no street door from this level. You believe him. Then why bring me out of the chair? Because you survived the first measure. First measure. Your mouth goes dry. How many are there? Vale does not answer. The young assistant does. 3. Vale turns on him, but the word is spoken. 3. Current, chamber, restoration. You do not know the order yet, but you know enough to understand that your night has barely begun. The door opens before anyone can say more. The doctor stands outside. He has removed his gloves. That detail scares you. A doctor removes gloves when one part is finished, or when the next part requires more precision. He looks at Vale. Is he steady? No, Vale says. The doctor's eyes move to you. Steady enough. Behind him, the corridor seems longer than before, darker. The doctor steps aside, inviting you out with a small motion of his hand. Polite again, always polite. That is how the century liked its horrors. Dressed properly, recorded neatly, named scientifically. We are ready for the lower room, he says. The young assistant grips the edge of the bench. Vale looks away, and you finally understand where the knocking came from. Not from beneath the laboratory, from where they are taking you next. The doctor waits. The gaslight flickers over his face. Come, he says. You should see what progress looks like before history forgets it. The lower chamber. The corridor slopes downward so gradually that at first you do not notice it. Only after several steps does your body begin to understand what your eyes have missed. The air grows colder. Dampness thickens along the walls. The gas lamps become fewer. And somewhere ahead, beneath the sound of your footsteps, water drips steadily into darkness. The doctor walks in front of you carrying a small lamp protected by a wire cage. The light swings gently with each step, pulling shadows across the brickwork like moving fingers. Behind you, Vale follows in silence. The young assistant does not come. You notice that immediately. You notice the relief in his face when the doctor chose not to bring him. That frightens you more than anything he said. The lower room is a place even the assistants fear. You descend another set of narrow stone stairs. Your hand brushes the wall for balance. Moisture coats your fingers. Old water, old brick, old London. The city above you feels impossibly distant now. No horses, no bells, no voices, only pipes, iron, water, and the steady pulse of machinery hidden beneath the bones of the building. The doctor stops before a heavy iron door. No number is painted on this one, no label, no handle on the outside, only a small observation slit at eye level. The doctor opens it briefly. A pale light spills through, then he closes it again. "You may hear things inside," he says calmly. "You are not to react." Not to react, as though reaction is a choice, as though fear can be instructed away like a cough. He removes a ring of keys from his pocket. One key is longer than the others, older, blackened from use. When he pushes it into the lock, the metal groans. Not loudly, but deeply. The sound of something unopened, resisting movement. Behind the door, you hear chains shift, then silence. The doctor opens the door inward. Warm air rolls out. Not comforting warmth, the wrong kind. Wet warmth. Human warmth trapped underground too long. And beneath it, the smell. Your stomach tightens instantly. Disinfectant, rot, burned cloth, sweat, chemicals, and another odor you recognize only after several seconds. The sweet, sickly smell of flowers. Fresh flowers. Too many of them. Used to cover something else. The lower chamber is larger than you expected. Much larger. The ceiling arches overhead in black brick, disappearing into shadow beyond the reach of the lamps. Pipes run everywhere, along the walls, across the ceiling, disappearing into strange tanks and pressure valves bolted into the stone. Some pipes are warm enough to steam faintly. Others drip cold water into shallow channels cut into the floor. And at the center of the chamber stands a structure unlike anything you have ever seen. At first glance, it resembles a medical theater chair. Then you see the restraints, then the glass cylinders, then the wires, then the breathing tubes, then the polished metal frame surrounding it, like the ribs of some enormous mechanical animal. The machine upstairs now seems small by comparison. That was only preparation. This is the real invention. You stop walking. The doctor notices immediately. "Most men do," he says softly. The chamber is not empty. 3 other men stand near the far wall writing notes beneath gas lamps. One of them turns a crank connected to a pressure gauge. Another adjusts a row of glass tubes filled with moving liquid. The third never looks away from the chair. Not from curiosity, from caution. There is someone in it. For one terrible moment, your mind refuses to understand what you are seeing. The figure strapped into the chair is covered almost entirely by canvas sheets and leather restraints. Metal contacts run along the arms. Tubes disappear beneath the cloth near the chest and neck. The head is tilted back unnaturally. At first, you think a man is dead. Then the fingers move. Only slightly. A twitch. But enough. The doctor walks past you into the chamber. "Subject 31, he says. Not a name. Never a name. The observers write quickly. You stare at the figure. The skin visible near the wrist is pale gray beneath the lamp glow. The fingernails are dark. Bruising spreads beneath the restraints where the leather is rubbed raw against the flesh. The hand twitches again. Not naturally, not like waking. More like a signal passing through damaged wire. One observer notices your expression. "The current stimulates muscular response after cessation," he says, almost proudly. Cessation. Another useful word. Victorian medicine possessed many words designed to step around death without touching it directly. Expired, unresponsive, suspended, cessation. As if language itself could soften what had happened in rooms like this. The doctor moves beside the chair and checks the pressure gauge. "Pulse absent," he says. The observer nods. "Respiration? Artificial only." Artificial. Your mouth goes dry. The flowers near the wall suddenly make sense. Not decoration, concealment. The sweet scent battling the odor of decay. Because whatever sits in the chair has crossed the border between medicine and something else. The doctor notices you staring at the figure's hand. "He was declared dead 6 hours ago," he says casually. The room tilts. No one else reacts. No one even pauses writing. You look from face to face, waiting for someone to laugh, to reveal some misunderstanding. No one does. The doctor adjusts the valve. Steam hisses through the pipes overhead. "In 1851, he says, newspapers across Europe reported experiments involving galvanic stimulation of recently deceased tissue." Electrical current could produce movement long after ordinary life had ended. He speaks like a lecturer now, measured, precise, comfortable. The public misunderstood those demonstrations. They imagined resurrection, reanimation, superstition. But the true question was always much simpler. He looks at you. How long does the body remain useful after death? Useful. The word lands heavily in the chamber. Useful, not sacred, not human. Useful. The figure in the chair jerks suddenly. One violent movement. The restraints creak. A tube rattles against metal. You stumble backward instinctively. The observers barely look up. 1.4 seconds longer than yesterday, one mutters while writing. 1.4 seconds. They are measuring something, not merely movement, control, duration, response. The doctor steps toward a table covered with instruments. Glass syringes, copper contacts, small wheels and dials, thin blades arranged carefully on cloth. Nothing appears dirty. That somehow makes it worse. Everything is organized, intentional, professional. You notice scratches carved into the edge of the chair beside the restrained hand. Not random marks. Words. Most are incomplete. One repeats several times. Wake, wake, wake. The doctor follows your eyes. Delirium near the end, he says. Near the end, not after. Near. That tiny difference changes everything. The doctor removes a notebook from his coat and turns several pages. Subject 31 was admitted to St. Bartholomew's after collapse during factory work. Severe exhaustion, malnutrition, chemical inhalation likely. You stare at the figure. Factory worker, poor, available, exactly as Vail described. Declared dead at 19 minutes past 4, the doctor continues. Initial response to restoration procedure occurred at 4:37. Restoration. There's that word again. Not resurrection, not revival. Restoration. As though humanity itself is becoming mechanical in their minds. A process, a function, something that can be restarted. The observer near the crank turns it carefully. Pressure builds in one of the glass cylinders. Fluid moves through the tubes attached to the body in the chair. Then comes the sound. A wet inhale. Not from lungs waking naturally. Forced. Mechanical. The chest beneath the canvas rises sharply. Your stomach twists. The observers lean forward immediately. Again, one says. The crank turns. Another breath. Artificial. Violent. Wrong. The fingers twitch. The head shifts slightly against the restraints. And then, the eyes open. Only halfway. Clouded, unfocused, but open. Every hair on your arms rises. The room becomes impossibly quiet. Even the pipes seem to stop. The eyes move slowly, searching. Not intelligently, not fully, but enough. Enough for every man in the room to understand what they are looking at. The doctor whispers, "Remarkable." The figure's mouth opens weakly. A sound escapes, not speech, air, pain, something between both. Then the eyes roll upward again. The body goes limp. The pressure gauge falls. One observer curses softly under his breath. Another writes furiously. The doctor remains perfectly still, watching, thinking, calculating. Not mourning, not horrified. Calculating. You step backward again until your shoulders touch the damp brick wall. Tonight you are standing in a room Victorian London was never supposed to see. Not because the machine failed, because it came too close to success. The doctor removes his spectacles slowly and cleans them with a cloth. In public, he says, they speak of electricity as entertainment, theater demonstrations, party tricks, frog legs twitching beneath wires. He replaces the spectacles. But governments do not fund theater tricks. One observer looks toward the door nervously. The doctor ignores him. They fund possibilities. The figure in the chair suddenly knocks against the restraint with one weak movement of the wrist. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. Your blood turns cold. The sound from beneath the laboratory. Not pipes, not machinery. The man in the chair made it, or whatever remains inside him did. One observer steps away from the machine immediately. Another crosses himself before realizing what he has done. The doctor notices both reactions. His face darkens slightly. Control yourselves. But now the chamber feels different. The invention is no longer theoretical, no longer experimental, no longer safe inside scientific language. Something in this room answers back. The figure's lips move weakly. You strain to hear. Nothing at first. Then, a word. Very faint, almost impossible to catch. Cold. The observer nearest the chair recoils. The doctor grips the armrest tightly. You feel your own breathing quicken. Because the worst part is not the movement, not the eyes, not the forced breaths. The worst part is that somewhere inside the broken body, a fragment of awareness may still remain. And every man in the room understands it at the same moment. One observer whispers, "We should stop." The doctor turns slowly toward him. "No." The word echoes softly through the chamber, not angry, certain. That certainty frightens you most of all, because obsession sounds calm when it finally reaches its deepest point. The doctor moves closer to the chair. "Increase the current." The observer hesitates. "Increase it." The machine hums louder. The pipes tremble. Blue sparks crawl faintly along the contacts fixed near the figure's neck. Then the body convulses violently. The restraints slam against metal. The eyes open fully this time. And for one impossible second, they lock directly onto yours. Not the doctor's, not the observer's, yours. The mouth opens again. The voice is shredded and weak, but unmistakably human now. "Please!" The word tears through the room like a blade. Everything stops. Even the doctor freezes. Because the machine was supposed to produce response, not recognition. And suddenly every man here understands the same horrifying truth. Something inside the chair is still alive enough to suffer. The figure jerks again. The pressure gauge spikes. One of the glass tubes bursts. Fluid sprays across the floor. The gas lamps flicker wildly. And beneath the rising scream of steam and machinery, the entire lower chamber shakes once beneath your feet, as though something larger below the foundations has begun to move. The men who sold miracles. The chamber trembles once. Dust slips from the ceiling beams. A hanging lamp swings gently above the machine, throwing long shadows across the walls. For one dizzy second, the moving light makes the entire room seem alive. Pipes bending like ribs, wires twitching like veins, steam breathing from the walls. Then everything stills again. The figure in the chair hangs limp beneath the restraints. The word remains trapped in the air. "Please." No one speaks. No one writes. Even the doctor stopped pretending this is merely observation. One of the observers slowly removes his spectacles and wipes condensation from the lenses with shaking fingers. Another stares openly at the body now, no longer with curiosity, but with the expression of a man who has suddenly realized he may already be standing inside a crime. The doctor recovers first. Men like him always do. Obsession survives shock faster than conscience. "Continue recording," he says quietly. The observers hesitate. His voice hardens. "Record everything." And just like that, the room begins moving again. Pens scratch paper, steam hisses through pipes, valves turn, pressure gauges stabilize. The machine continues breathing for the body in the chair. Because once an invention reaches this stage, stopping becomes harder than continuing. The doctor steps closer to the restrained figure and checks the eyes with a small brass instrument. "No coordinated awareness," he murmurs, but you hear uncertainty beneath the words. Because the body looked directly at you. Not randomly, not mechanically, directly. The observer nearest the crank whispers, "It recognized him." "No," says the doctor immediately, "too quickly. It responded to movement." But no one sounds convinced anymore. That is the problem with forbidden inventions. The danger is not always failure. Sometimes the danger is success witnessed by too many people. You feel the room changing around you. The observers are no longer merely assistants to an experiment. Now they are men, deciding whether they should fear their employer. The doctor notices it too. He removes his gloves slowly. "You misunderstand what you have seen," he says to the room. "Electrical stimulation of the nervous system may produce vocalization under specific circumstances." Specific circumstances. Another carefully chosen phrase. Victorian science often buried fear beneath language. When a corpse sat upright during galvanic demonstrations, newspapers called it muscular excitation. When eyes opened after death, they called it residual reflex. When limbs moved beneath current, they called it post-mortem responsiveness. Words allowed respectable society to stand beside horror without naming it directly. But language weakens when someone whispers, please. The doctor gestures toward the machine. This is not resurrection, he says firmly. It is restoration of function. Restoration. Always restoration. Never revival. Never life. As though changing the word could control the truth. You stare at the figure in the chair. The chest rises again beneath the canvas with another forced breath. Artificial, mechanical. And yet, the body still feels occupied somehow. Like a house with one candle left burning inside. The doctor notices your expression. You think death is a moment, he says. His voice is calmer now, lecturing again. But death is often a process. Victorian medicine has always struggled with that fact. He walks slowly around the chair while speaking. In freezing water, the drowned sometimes appeared dead for hours before breathing again. Patients buried beneath avalanches survived without pulse. Certain poisons slowed the body so dramatically that doctors declared death too early. His fingers brushed the brass frame lovingly. And electricity revealed something uncomfortable. He stops beside you. The body does not surrender all at once. The observer near the crank shifts uneasily. The doctor continues. For centuries, mankind feared premature burial. Bells were attached to coffins. Safety mechanisms were patented. Doctors placed mirrors beneath noses, searching for breath. You remember the mirror beneath your own face upstairs? The doctor sees recognition in your eyes. Yes, he says softly, because the boundary between death and life has never been as clean as people wish. That statement is true, which makes it dangerous, because the most frightening inventions often begin with truths. Outside this chamber, London continues pretending certainty exists. Doctors sign certificates. Priests conduct burials. Families close coffins. But underneath the city's confidence lived an old terror. What if someone was still inside? Tonight, you are standing in the place where that terror became machinery. The doctor lifts a cloth from a nearby table. Beneath it lies a row of strange instruments. Not surgical, not entirely. Copper bands shaped for wrists and temples. A metal cage designed to fit around the skull. Glass inhalation masks connected to tubes. Small rotary wheels with leather straps. Mechanical joints built to force movement into stiff limbs. You realize suddenly that the invention is not one machine. It is many failed ideas stitched together. An entire century trying to negotiate with death using wires and gears. One observer speaks carefully. If the newspapers learned of this, the doctor cuts him off immediately. The newspapers would destroy it. Destroy it. Not report it, not debate it, destroy it. That means others already know enough to fear the machine. The observer lowers his eyes. The doctor turns toward you again. People believe progress arrives cleanly, he says. They imagine polished exhibitions and smiling inventors beside harmless devices. His hand rests on the restraint beside the body. But progress is built underground first. The chamber around you proves it. Everything here feels hidden from history deliberately. No university insignia, no public records, no official plaques, only brick, steam, numbers, and bodies. A slow, dripping sound echoes somewhere deeper in the foundations. You glance toward the far wall. A narrow tunnel disappears into darkness beyond the machinery. Iron rails run along the floor into it, small rails, like the tracks used in mines or old underground service tunnels. The doctor notices your attention. That section is restricted. Restricted, meaning occupied. Another mystery opens quietly inside the room. The knocking beneath the laboratory. The movement below the foundations. The hidden rails. The lower chamber is not the deepest part of the building. One of the observers notices the tunnel too and quickly looks away. That reaction tells you enough. Whatever exists beyond those rails frightens even them. A violent cough suddenly erupts from the figure in the chair. Everyone freezes. The body jerks hard against the restraints. Fluid bubbles inside the tubes. The machine hisses. And for the first time, the doctor looks genuinely alarmed. Reduce pressure, he snaps. The observer at the crank obeys instantly. Too late. The coughing continues. Wet. Deep. Impossible. Your stomach twists again because dead lungs should not cough. The body convulses once more, then suddenly vomits dark fluid across the canvas restraints. One observer stumbles backward in horror. Another mutters a prayer under his breath. The doctor grabs the side of the chair. "Hold him steady!" Him, not it. You notice the word immediately, so does everyone else. The doctor realizes his mistake too late. The coughing weakens, then stops. The body slumps again beneath the straps. Silence returns slowly. The doctor breathes heavily through his nose. For several seconds, no one speaks. Then the observer nearest the gauges whispers, "How long was he declared dead?" 6 hours, replies the doctor. The observer looks sick, because 6 hours is far beyond accidental survival, far beyond premature burial stories, far beyond ordinary medicine. The doctor wipes fluid from the restraint calmly, but you can see tension now in the movements of his hands. Tiny tremors, tiny cracks in certainty. That means even he no longer fully controls what this invention is doing. And that realization becomes the true danger of the room. Not that the machine exists, that it may already be exceeding the intentions of the men who built it. Victorian history is filled with inventions that escaped their inventors. Factories exploded. Chemical compounds poisoned entire neighborhoods. Medical devices caused injuries no one predicted. Early X-ray researchers burned their own flesh before understanding radiation. Progress often learned through damage first. But this feels different, because the damage here may still be conscious enough to suffer it. The observer with spectacles steps away from the chair. "We should stop the trials." The doctor turns toward him slowly. "You volunteered for this work. I volunteered for medicine. And what do you think medicine is?" The observer says nothing. The doctor's voice lowers. "Every major advancement in human history frightens someone first." He gestures toward the pipes overhead. Railways frighten people, toward the electrical contacts. Electricity frightened people, toward the breathing apparatus. Anesthesia frightened surgeons. He steps closer to the observer. "Fear is not evidence of failure." That sentence settles heavily into the room, because it sounds reasonable. And history has often moved forward behind sentences that sounded reasonable at the time. That is the danger of obsession mixed with intelligence. It rarely sounds insane at first. The body in the chair twitches again, smaller now, weak. One finger taps slowly against the armrest. Tap, tap, tap. 3 times again. The exact rhythm from beneath the laboratory floor. The observers exchange frightened looks. The doctor notices immediately. "Coincidence." No one answers him, because coincidence stops feeling convincing after the 3rd repetition. You glance again toward the hidden rail tunnel. The darkness there seems thicker somehow. The dripping sound continues, slow, patient, like water falling deep underground, or footsteps very far away. The doctor removes the copper contacts from the body carefully. "Subject 31 has exceeded prior restoration duration," he says, returning to his notebook. "This alone justifies continuation." Justifies. Everything in this chamber is justified by results. Pain, fear, numbers replacing names, bodies becoming experiments. The observers reluctantly resume writing, but the room has changed permanently now. Everyone here has heard the voice. Everyone here has seen the eyes. Everyone here knows the machine crossed some invisible line tonight. And you understand something else. The invention disappeared from history not because it failed, but because eventually someone realized what counted as success. The doctor closes his notebook, then turns toward you. "Number 47, he says. Your throat tightens immediately. "You will proceed to the 2nd measure." The words feel colder than the chamber itself. The observers avoid looking directly at you now. That frightens you more than the machine, because they looked away from the gray-bearded man too. And tonight, you are beginning to understand why. The doctor gestures toward another apparatus standing near the hidden tunnel entrance. This one is smaller than the chair machine, but somehow worse. A metal frame, a standing restraint. Glass cylinders attached beside the skull position. Copper coils surrounding where the head would rest. And above it all, a polished brass helmet lined inside with dozens of thin silver needles. The doctor sees you staring at it. "Memory," he says quietly. Only one word, but it changes the entire room again. Because now you finally understand. They are not merely trying to restore the body. They are trying to restore the mind. And suddenly the hidden tunnel beneath the chamber no longer feels like storage. It feels like containment, the machine that remembered. The helmet hangs above the standing frame like an execution device waiting for a sentence. Gaslight slides across the silver needles lining the inside of it. Thin, delicate, too many to count quickly. Some are long enough to reach the scalp, others barely protrude at all. Not built to pierce deeply. Built to touch precisely. That somehow feels worse. The doctor walks toward the apparatus with visible care now, almost reverence. The observers watch him closely. No one jokes, no one whispers. The room has changed since the voice from the chair. Before, this place felt experimental. Now it feels dangerous, not only to the subjects, to everyone inside it. The doctor places one hand gently on the metal frame. This was originally intended for memory recovery, he says. Recovery, another pleasant word hiding something ugly. He gestures toward the coils surrounding the head restraint. Electrical stimulation of damaged neural pathways. The observer with spectacles says quietly, "That was before." The doctor ignores him. In certain cases, he continues, patients who suffered head trauma occasionally recalled forgotten details when exposed to current. This part, you realize, is true. Fragments of real medicine live inside the nightmare. Victorian researchers truly experimented with nerves, memory, electricity, trauma, consciousness. Some discoveries advanced medicine. Others wandered into territory no one understood. And the 19th century possessed a dangerous confidence. If something produced results once, it could be perfected, even if the first result happened by accident. The doctor touches the brass helmet lightly. Then we observe something unexpected. Of course they did. Every terrible invention begins with that sentence. The observers glance uneasily toward the hidden tunnel again. Not toward the chair, toward the darkness beyond the rails. That tells you where the real fear lives now. The doctor motions for you to step closer. Your body refuses at first. Only slightly. Only enough for him to notice. He studies you carefully. Fear sharpens memory, he says softly. That sentence lands inside you immediately, because it sounds less like observation and more like intention. Two assistants emerge from the shadows carrying straps. Fresh straps. Smaller than the ones on the chair. Designed for standing restraint. One assistant avoids your eyes completely. The other looks at you only once, and in that single glance, you see pity. Not enough pity to help you. Only enough to make the room colder. You step toward the frame slowly. The floor beneath your boots vibrates faintly again. Not from the machinery upstairs, from deeper below. Always below. You look toward the tunnel entrance. The rails disappear into darkness untouched by the gaslight. A damp draft moves slowly out of it carrying the smell of old water and something else beneath it. Something organic. Not rot exactly, more like a cellar sealed too long. The doctor notices your attention. That section houses earlier models. Models, not people, never people. That is another trick of the century. Factories called workers' units. Hospitals called patients, subjects. Asylums called prisoners, cases. And hidden rooms beneath London called men, models. The standing frame is colder than the chair. Metal presses against your spine. Your wrists are fastened at shoulder height. Your head rests against padded leather, darkened by sweat from other men. The helmet lowers slowly. The silver needles hover near your scalp, close enough for you to feel their cold without touching. One observer adjusts a dial connected to the coils surrounding your head. The copper hums faintly. You smell ozone immediately, sharp, dry, storm smell. The smell of lightning trapped indoors. The doctor stands directly before you now. For the first time since entering the building, he removes the calm mask completely. Not anger, not cruelty, excitement. Pure intellectual hunger. That frightens you more than violence would. Violence can lose interest. Obsession cannot. We believe memory leaves physical traces, he says quietly. The observers continue preparing instruments around you. Patterns in the nerves, residual electrical pathways, emotional imprints. He studies your face. Especially fear. There it is again. Fear, not accidental, necessary. The doctor nods toward the assistant at the controls. Begin with low induction. The coils hum louder. The needles touch your scalp, tiny points of pressure, then heat, Not pain yet. Only warmth spreading beneath your skin like water moving through hidden channels. Your jaw tightens automatically. The doctor watches every twitch carefully. "What is your earliest memory?" he asks. The question catches you off guard. "What? Your earliest memory?" You hesitate. "I don't know." "Everyone knows." The hum deepens. A strange pressure builds behind your eyes, not painful, intrusive, as though invisible fingers are pressing against thoughts instead of flesh. The gas lamps blur briefly. You smell rain suddenly, not in the chamber, somewhere else, a different time. The doctor notices the shift in your face immediately. "Yes," he whispers. "Good." The warmth spreads through your skull, and then the room changes, not physically inside you. A memory surfaces without permission. A muddy London alley after rainfall, your mother pulling your sleeve, the sound of horses splashing through dirty water, cold hands, church bells. You blink hard. The chamber returns. Your breathing quickens. "How?" The doctor smiles slightly. Again. The current increases. The memory slams into you harder this time. Not images alone, sensations. Wet wool against your neck, coal smoke, fear. You are small again. Lost briefly in a crowd, panic rising in your chest. Then your mother's hand grabbing yours suddenly. Relief. The memory vanishes. You gasp. The observers are writing furiously now. The doctor's excitement sharpens visibly. "Emotional response amplified," he murmurs. You realize with horror that the machine is not reading memory. It is pulling memory upward, forcing doors open inside the mind. Victorian science adored classification. Phrenology tried to map personality through skull shape. Early neurologists attempted to locate morality, language, violence, grief, memory itself within physical structures of the brain. Most failed. But failure rarely stopped experimentation, especially when wealthy men funded it quietly. The doctor steps closer. "What do you fear most?" he asks. The question feels wrong immediately, too personal, too eager. You say nothing. The hum deepens again. Pain flashes behind your eyes, and another memory rises before you can stop it. A graveyard, night, not recent, years ago. You are helping lower a coffin into frozen soil. A sound comes from inside. You freeze. Others pretend not to hear it. The memory tears through you so vividly that your knees nearly buckle against the restraints. The doctor sees everything in your face. "There," he whispers. The observers exchange looks. One mutters, "God help us," because they realize it too. The machine does not simply restore memory, it intensifies it. Fear becomes stronger, pain becomes clearer, trauma becomes immediate again. And suddenly, you understand why the doctor became obsessed. If memory itself can be electrically manipulated, then identity becomes mechanical too. Tonight, you are the man trapped inside the machine, and the machine is learning which parts of you hurt most. The current stops abruptly. You gasp for breath. Sweat runs down your temples. The doctor studies his notes carefully. Emotional recall significantly increased under elevated induction. The observer with spectacles speaks carefully. "This is not medicine anymore." The doctor does not even look at him. "No," he says softly. "It is advancement." The room falls silent again, because everyone here now understands the truth. The invention was never meant merely to revive the body. It was meant to preserve consciousness itself, not life, awareness, memory, fear, perhaps even obedience. One observer whispers, "Military funding." The doctor finally turns toward him sharply. "Be careful." Too late. The sentence hangs in the air now. Military funding. Suddenly, the hidden chamber makes perfect sense. Not a hospital, not entirely. A laboratory hidden beneath London, where forgotten inventions are tested far from public eyes. Not because they are impossible, because governments are interested, and governments rarely fund harmless ideas. A sharp metallic bang suddenly echoes from deep within the tunnel. Everyone freezes instantly. The doctor's expression changes at once. Not annoyance, fear, real fear. Another sound follows, metal scraping slowly across rail tracks. The observers stare toward the darkness. One assistant whispers, "It moved again." Again, the doctor steps away from you immediately. How long since the restraints were checked? 3 hours. That is too long. 3 hours. Your stomach tightens. Whatever exists beyond the tunnel requires restraints. The observers begin arguing quietly. We should terminate the lower trials. Not until the transfer is complete. It's unstable. So is every breakthrough. The doctor silences them with one look. Then the metallic scraping comes again, closer, slow, heavy. Not machinery, movement. Something dragging weight along the rails beneath the city. Your breathing quickens. The doctor notices, "This does not concern you." But that sentence only confirms the opposite. The gas lamps near the tunnel flicker weakly. A shape moves briefly in the darkness beyond them. Too large for a dog, too uneven for a machine, then gone again. One observer crosses himself openly this time. Nobody mocks him now. The doctor walks toward the tunnel entrance carrying the caged lamp. Steam curls around his boots. The observers follow reluctantly, stopping several feet behind him. You remain strapped inside the frame, unable to move, forced to watch. The doctor raises the lamp toward the darkness. For several seconds, nothing happens, then 3 knocks echo from somewhere below the rails. Knock, knock, knock. Exactly the same rhythm. Not random, intentional. The doctor closes his eyes briefly, almost tired now. Then he says something quietly enough that perhaps he does not realize you can hear it. It remembers. The observers stare at him. No one speaks. Because that sentence changes everything. Not a body reacting, not a reflex, not a mechanism. Memory. Somewhere below the chamber, something restored by the machine still remembers enough to answer back. The doctor slowly lowers the lamp. And for one terrible second, the light catches something in the darkness beyond the rails. A pale human hand gripping the tunnel wall. Then it disappears instantly into blackness. One observer stumbles backward in horror. Another whispers, "We should never have continued after Subject 13. The doctor turns sharply, "Enough!" But now you finally have another piece of the story. There were earlier subjects, many earlier subjects, and one of them still exists below the laboratory. The doctor walks back toward you slowly. The excitement has vanished from his face now. Only exhaustion remains. Exhaustion and determination. He studies you silently for several seconds, then reaches toward the machine controls again. "You have stronger recall than the others," he says. The coils hum faintly beside your head. "That makes you useful." Useful. Always useful. Never human. The doctor's hand rests on the lever, and somewhere deep beneath London, something that should no longer be alive knocks once more beneath the floor. Subject 13. The doctor does not touch the lever immediately. That is what frightens you, not hesitation, consideration. As though he is weighing risk against curiosity inside his own mind. The tunnel behind him breathes cold air into the chamber. The gas lamps near the rails flicker weakly every few seconds, disturbed by movement somewhere deep below. No one speaks now. The observers no longer look like scientists. They look like men trapped underground with something they regret creating. The doctor finally removes his hand from the controls. "Release him," he says quietly. For one impossible second, you think he means freedom. Then the assistants loosen only the head restraint. Not the wrists, not the chest, not the ankles. Just enough for the brass helmet to lift from your scalp with a wet, metallic sound. The tiny silver needles leave burning points behind. You gasp as cold air touches the sweat on your skin. The doctor studies you carefully. "Do you remember anything unusual during induction?" You stare at him. He wants details, not concern, never concern. "The graveyard," you say slowly. "The coffin." His eyes sharpen immediately. "The knocking." You say nothing, but he already sees the answer in your face. One observer mutters softly, "It's connecting memory patterns." The doctor ignores him. "Fear pathways remain active longer than ordinary recall," he says almost to himself. "Trauma imprints deeply." Again, that terrible excitement returns briefly to his voice. The observer with spectacles steps closer. "You cannot continue increasing induction levels." The doctor finally turns. "And why not?" "Because the subjects are beginning to retain awareness during restoration." The chamber goes still again. Retain awareness. The doctor says nothing for several seconds. Then, "That is precisely the point." No one answers. because that sentence confirms the true purpose of the invention. Not reviving muscle, not extending heartbeat, consciousness. The doctor walks slowly toward the chair where subject 31 remains strapped beneath the canvas. The body has stopped moving entirely now, but nobody in the chamber trusts stillness anymore. Not after the voice, not after the knocking. The doctor adjusts the blanket near the figure's neck almost gently. History will misunderstand this work, he says quietly. The observers exchange uneasy glances. They always misunderstand the first stage of progress. One observer laughs bitterly. Is that what this is now? Progress? The doctor turns sharply. You think modern surgery appeared without suffering? No answer. You think anesthesia was perfected without mistakes? That hospitals became safer without bodies in the ground first? He gestures toward the machine. Every advancement demands a price. The observer with spectacles replies softly, yes, but usually the dead stop speaking afterward. That sentence lands heavily in the room. Even the doctor has no immediate reply. And somewhere beyond the tunnel, metal scrapes slowly across the rails again. Closer now, the sound is uneven, dragging, like someone injured pulling weight behind them. Every observer turns toward the darkness instantly. One assistant whispers, it's not supposed to leave the lower section. Not supposed to, which means it has before. The doctor moves toward the tunnel entrance again, faster this time. Lantern! An assistant hands him the caged lamp immediately. The doctor raises it toward the darkness beyond the rails. Nothing visible, only dripping water. Brick walls disappearing into blackness. Steam drifting low across the floor. Then, a shape moves briefly behind one of the support pillars. Too fast to identify, but unmistakably human. The assistant nearest the tunnel backs away immediately. We should lock the gate. The doctor ignores him. Subject 13, he says quietly, almost to himself. Come forward. No response. The observers stare at him in disbelief, because he is speaking to it, not about it, to it. For several seconds, only dripping water answers. Then something knocks softly against metal deeper below. Knock, knock, knock. The exact same rhythm again. The doctor closes his eyes briefly, not afraid, listening, as though the pattern means something. One observer whispers, it still recognizes the signal. Signal, not memory. Signal. The doctor finally lowers the lamp. He remembers instruction. Your blood runs cold. Because instruction means training, conditioning, control. Whatever Subject 13 became, it was not accidental. Tonight you are the man standing inside a laboratory, where Victorian scientists tried to preserve obedience after death. The realization settles into you slowly, and with it comes something worse. The machine upstairs was only the public face of the invention. The lower chamber was where the real work began. The observers move farther from the tunnel now. Only the doctor remains near it. That alone tells you how deeply obsession has hollowed him out. One observer speaks carefully. We lost 3 men during the February incident. The doctor says nothing. The restraints failed. Still nothing. The subject attacked. Enough! The doctor's voice cracks through the chamber sharply this time. The observer falls silent, but the damage is done. Now you know, someone died here already. Not subjects, staff. The invention crossed its line long ago. The doctor simply refused to stop afterward. Victorian London buried many things quietly. Industrial accidents, hospital infections, asylum deaths, workhouse disappearances, bodies from the Thames. The city consumed human suffering faster than newspapers could print it. That allowed rooms like this to survive beneath the surface. Because missing poor men rarely became investigations, and dangerous discoveries rarely remained moral once governments became interested. The doctor walks back toward the standing frame. His expression has changed again. More tired now, less triumphant, as though Subject 13 has become something even he no longer fully understands. He stops directly before you. Do you know why electricity fascinated Victorian scientists so deeply? You do not answer. Because it resembled life. His fingers brush the copper coils lightly. The heart moves electrically. The nerves communicate electrically. Muscles respond electrically. He leans closer. For the first time in history, mankind could interfere directly with the body's invisible language. Invisible language. That phrase lingers in your mind, because perhaps that is what frightens everyone here. Not that the machine moves flesh, that it speaks to something beneath flesh. The doctor steps aside suddenly. Bring the archive case. One assistant hesitates. The archive? Now. The assistant disappears briefly into a side corridor. While waiting, the doctor studies the tunnel entrance again constantly, as though expecting movement at any moment. The observers pretend not to notice, but all of them stand farther from the darkness now. The assistant returns carrying a long wooden case reinforced with brass corners. Heavy, old, dust coats the lid. The doctor unlocks it carefully. Inside are papers, photographs, and several thin wax cylinders used for recorded sound. Your stomach tightens immediately. Sound recordings. The doctor removes one cylinder carefully and holds it near the gaslight. Early attempts, he says quietly. One observer steps back immediately. Doctor! The doctor ignores him again. He inserts the cylinder into a phonograph machine positioned near the workbench. The needle lowers. Static crackles softly. Then, a voice. Weak, distorted, but human. Subject 13, says the doctor calmly beside the recording. A pause. Then another voice answers, male, frightened. How long have I been here? The chamber goes completely silent. The recording continues. You suffered traumatic cessation during the procedure, the doctor's recorded voice says. We are attempting restoration. The frightened voice breathes shakily. I can't feel my hands. The observers stare at the machine now with visible dread. The recording crackles again. Then Subject 13 speaks once more. Why can I hear them below the floor? Your skin turns cold instantly. Below the floor. Even before the incident, there was something beneath the laboratory. The doctor stops the recording abruptly. No one speaks, because now the story beneath the story is becoming visible. Subject 13 was not the first mystery in this building, only the first one they failed to contain. The observer with spectacles whispers, You should have destroyed those recordings. No, says the doctor quietly. History deserves accuracy. Accuracy. The word feels obscene here. The doctor replaces the cylinder carefully inside the case. Then he removes a photograph. He studies it silently for several seconds before handing it toward you. You hesitate, then take it. The image is faded, blurry, but clear enough. A man standing beside the original machine years earlier. Tall, thin, dark coat, sunken eyes, and attached behind his ear, a copper contact wire. The number tag on his chest reads, You stare at the face. Not because it looks monstrous, because it looks ordinary, human. The sort of man you would pass on a London street without remembering. The doctor watches your expression carefully. He survived longer than any other subject. Survived. Not restored, survived. You look back toward the tunnel entrance slowly, the rails disappearing underground, the scraping sounds, the hand in the darkness, the knocking. And now one horrifying realization finally locks into place. Subject 13 is still somewhere below the laboratory. Not dead, not alive. Something between both. The gas lamps flicker violently for one brief second, then the tunnel answers with another metallic scrape. Closer than before, much closer. One observer whispers, He knows we're talking about him. The doctor says nothing. That silence becomes answer enough. Then, from deep within the darkness below London, a voice rises faintly through the tunnel, distorted, broken, but unmistakably human. Doctor. Every man in the chamber freezes. The phonograph needle skips softly in the silence. And for the first time all night, the doctor looks afraid. The thing beneath London. No one moves after the voice. The gas lamps hiss softly overhead. Steam curls through the chamber, and somewhere deep in the tunnel, water drips steadily into darkness. Doctor. The word still hangs in the air. Thin, broken, human. One observer makes a choking sound in his throat and backs away so quickly he nearly overturns a tray of instruments. Another grips the edge of the workbench hard enough for his knuckles to whiten. Only the doctor remains still. Too still. Like a man listening to a ghost he has already spent years trying to explain away. Then the voice comes again. Closer this time. Doctor. The final syllable drags strangely, as though the mouth forming it has forgotten how speech should move. You feel every muscle in your body tighten against the restraints automatically. The observers are frightened. Truly frightened now. Not of scandal, not of failure, of something alive in the tunnel. One assistant whispers, "Seal the lower gate." The doctor finally speaks. "No." The assistant stares at him in disbelief. "It escaped the containment rail last time." "No," the doctor repeats quietly. "He returned." He, not it, not subject, not model. He. That single word chills the chamber more than the voice itself. Because somewhere beneath London, the doctor still sees a man inside the horror. Or perhaps he needs to. The scraping sound comes again, closer. Slow metal dragging over stone. You realize suddenly that Subject 13 is not walking normally. Something about the movement is wrong. Injured, damaged, rebuilt imperfectly. The observers retreat farther from the tunnel entrance. Only the doctor stands his ground beside the rails. The caged lamp trembles slightly in his hand now. Not much, but enough. Enough to prove fear finally exists beneath the obsession. Victorian London loved underground spaces, sewers, train tunnels, burial vaults, storage chambers, service passages. Entire hidden arteries beneath the city carried waste, water, bodies, machinery, and secrets. Most respectable citizens never saw them. That was the point. The deeper something existed beneath London, the easier society found it to ignore. The tunnel before you feels older than the laboratory itself, brick blackened by decades of damp. Iron rails disappearing into a darkness thick enough to feel solid. And somewhere down there, something restored by forgotten machinery still remembers its creator's name. The doctor raises the lamp higher. 13, he says calmly. No response. Only dripping water. Then, 3 knocks echo softly through the tunnel walls. Knock, knock, knock. Not random. Communication. The observers look horrified because they understand it too. The doctor lowers his voice slightly. You should not have come this far. A shape shifts briefly at the edge of the darkness. Human height, too thin, one shoulder bent strangely lower than the other. Then, stillness again. The assistant near the workbench whispers, God. The doctor cuts him off sharply. No sudden movement. You notice immediately that this instruction is not for the observers. It is for the thing in the tunnel, as though sudden motion might provoke it. That means this has happened before, more than once. The tunnel breathes cold air into the chamber again. And now another smell reaches you beneath the dampness and steam. Rotting bandages, chemical preservative, burned skin, the smell of hospitals after failed operations, the smell of something medically prolonged beyond what nature intended. Then the shape steps forward, slowly. The gaslight catches it piece by piece. First the hand gripping the wall, pale, too pale. The fingers elongated slightly by swollen joints and scar tissue. Then the sleeve, dark coat, torn at the cuff. Then the face. One observer gasps aloud. Subject 13 looks almost human. That is the worst part. Not monstrous enough to dismiss, not dead enough to understand. His skin is stretched tightly across the face, gray beneath the lamp glow. Thin copper contacts remain attached behind one ear, disappearing beneath the collar like roots left buried inside flesh. One eye focuses normally, the other drifts slightly, as though the nervous system behind it no longer fully agrees with itself. Water drips from the coat hem steadily onto the rails. The left side of his neck is heavily scarred, where the skin has darkened from repeated electrical burns. But the mouth still looks painfully human. Subject 13 blinks slowly against the gaslight, then looks directly at the doctor. Recognition passes between them immediately, not instinct, memory. You realize suddenly that the true horror here is not resurrection, relationship. They know each other. The doctor speaks first. You left the lower section. Subject 13 tilts his head slightly. The movement is jerky, delayed, as though the body receives instructions a fraction too late. You said, the voice rasps weakly, you said it would stop hurting. One observer turns away immediately, unable to look anymore, because now the room has changed completely. This is no longer an experiment reacting mechanically. This is suffering that remembers promises. The doctor's face tightens. The procedure became unstable. A faint smile twitches across Subject 13's damaged face. Procedure? The word sounds almost amused, or bitter, hard to tell. His breathing is wrong. Too shallow at times, then suddenly too deep. Mechanical irregularity mixed with human exhaustion. The observers remain frozen near the walls. No one approaches. No one runs. Everyone is waiting for the doctor to decide whether the thing before them is patient or threat. Subject 13's gaze drifts slowly across the chamber, the chair, the machinery, the observers, then finally settles on you. Your number tag catches the gaslight. 47. Something changes in his expression. Recognition again, not of you, of the number. You started counting again, he whispers. The exact phrase from earlier. Your blood runs cold. Because now, you understand what the numbering system means. Not organization, replacement. There were others after 13, many others. Subject 13 studies the standing frame holding you restrained, the copper coils, the helmet, the needles, and something like pity passes briefly across his ruined face. You should leave, he says quietly. One observer whispers urgently, Doctor, send him back below. The doctor ignores him. Instead, he steps closer to Subject 13 slowly, too close, obsessively close, like a man approaching proof that years of suffering were not meaningless. You retained memory longer than expected, the doctor murmurs. Subject 13 laughs weakly. The sound is horrible, not because it is monstrous, because it sounds tired, human. I retained pain longer too. Silence crushes the room afterward. The doctor says nothing. For the first time tonight, he truly has no prepared scientific language left. Because pain destroys abstraction. Pain turns subjects back into people. Subject 13 looks toward the chair where Subject 31 lies motionless beneath the restraints. His expression changes instantly. Fear. Real fear. Did you use the pressure chamber, he asks. No one answers. That is answer enough. Subject 13 closes his eyes briefly. When the breathing stops, he whispers, don't restart it. One observer covers his mouth, another quietly begins crying without sound. Because whatever happened below London was not a miracle. It was prolonged dying. The doctor steps closer again. You survived. No. Subject 13 opens his eyes. I continued. That sentence freezes the chamber completely. Not survived, continued, as though existence itself has become something separate from living. Victorian science often blurred lines it did not yet understand. Early neurologists debated whether personality lived in the brain or soul. Electrical researchers wondered whether life itself might simply be organized current. Public demonstrations of galvanism made dead tissue twitch before horrified audiences. Most people saw spectacle. But men like the doctor saw possibility. And possibility is dangerous when combined with ambition. Subject 13 touches the tunnel wall weakly for balance. His hand leaves damp marks behind. You kept the others below, he says softly. One observer whispers, there are more? The doctor says sharply, enough. Too late again. Now the room knows. More subjects exist beneath the laboratory. Not dead, not alive. Stored, contained, forgotten deliberately. A deep metallic boom suddenly echoes somewhere far below the tunnel. The entire chamber trembles lightly. Subject 13 reacts immediately. Fear flashes across his ruined face. Not fear for himself, fear of something deeper underground. You woke them, he whispers. Every observer stiffens. The doctor's expression darkens instantly. There are no others active. Subject 13 looks directly at him. The silence between them feels old, longer than tonight, longer than this chamber. Finally, Subject 13 says quietly, you still lie to yourself. The gas lamps flicker violently again. Somewhere below, another metallic impact echoes upward through the foundations. Closer, stronger. The observers begin panicking openly now. We need to leave. Seal the tunnel. Shut down the current. But the doctor still stares only at Subject 13, obsessed even now. What happened below the third gate? He asks quietly. Subject 13's expression changes immediately. Pure dread. For several seconds he cannot answer. Then finally, we found memory. The chamber goes silent. Not ordinary silence, the kind that arrives when every person present realizes they are standing at the edge of something they were never meant to hear. The doctor steps closer. What does that mean? Subject 13 looks toward the darkness behind him, toward whatever waits deeper underground. And when he speaks again, his voice barely rises above a whisper. It remembered how to wake up. At that exact moment, something massive slams once against metal somewhere below the tunnel. The rails beneath the chamber shudder violently. Gas lamps swing overhead, steam bursts from one of the pipes, and far beneath London, something knocks back. Not 3 times, many, dozens, rapid, violent, like multiple hands striking from underground all at once. The third gate. The knocking below the chamber does not stop. It spreads. Metal trembles somewhere deep beneath the rails. The impacts echo upward through pipes, walls, and foundations, until the entire underground laboratory feels hollow beneath your feet. One observer drops his notebook entirely. Another backs toward the stairs leading upward, his breathing shallow and rapid. Only the doctor remains near the tunnel, not calm anymore, focused. There is a difference. Calm men believe they control events. Focused men know control is already slipping away. Subject 13 grips the tunnel wall harder as another violent impact shakes dust from the ceiling. You open the third gate, he whispers. The doctor does not deny it. That silence is enough. The observers exchange terrified looks immediately. One assistant says quietly, I thought the third section was sealed. It was, replies the doctor. Was, not is. The chamber lights flicker again. For 1 second, darkness swallows everything. Then the gas lamps return weakly, trembling inside their glass housings. In that brief darkness, you hear something else below. Not knocking, breathing, many breaths, slow, uneven. The observers heard it too. You see it in their faces immediately. One whispers, no. Victorian London buried many fears beneath science. But some fears survived every century unchanged. Fear of plague, fear of burial, fear of madness. And deepest of all, fear that something dead may still be aware enough to suffer. The doctor steps toward the tunnel entrance again. Lanterns, he says sharply. 2 assistants obey immediately, though their hands shake badly. Subject 13 suddenly grabs the doctor's sleeve. The movement is weak but desperate. Don't go lower. The doctor looks down at the damaged hand gripping him. Why? For the first time since emerging from the tunnel, Subject 13 looks openly terrified. Because they remember the way back. The chamber falls silent again. Remember the way back. Not random movement, not animal instinct. Memory. The machine restored memory. And memory led something underground to continue existing long after it should have ended. The doctor slowly removes Subject 13's hand from his sleeve. Not cruelly, almost sadly. You are proof the procedure functions. Subject 13 gives a weak laugh. No, he whispers. I'm proof it doesn't end. That sentence stays inside the room long after he says it, because everyone understands now. The invention never truly restored life. It trapped consciousness in damaged bodies unable to finish dying. Another violent crash erupts below the rails. Closer now, the pipes overhead rattle sharply. One bursts near the far wall, spraying steam across the bricks. The observers panic immediately. We must evacuate. Seal the tunnel. Destroy the current generators. The doctor turns toward them sharply. If we shut the generators down completely, he stops. No one speaks. Because now another truth becomes visible. The electricity is not merely powering machines, it is containing something. One observer stares at the tunnel in horror. The induction field. The doctor says nothing. Again, silence becomes confirmation. The humming current throughout the underground laboratory is acting as restraint. Not physical restraint, something else. The standing frame holding you vibrates faintly. Copper coils hum around your head. You suddenly understand why the building itself feels alive. The entire underground structure is part of the invention. The pipes, the rails, the coils, the pressure chambers, everything connected, everything feeding current downward beneath London. Not toward restoration, toward containment. Tonight, you are the man discovering the laboratory was never built to revive the dead. It was built to keep them from climbing back out. The realization hits so hard it almost makes you dizzy. Subject 13 sees understanding appear on your face. "You hear them now," he whispers. Not a question, a fact. And suddenly, you do. Beneath the machinery, beneath the steam, beneath the pipes, very faintly, movement below the foundations. Dragging feet, scraping nails, wet coughing. Not one sound, many. The doctor notices your reaction immediately. The machine increases sensory retention after induction. Again, he hides horror beneath scientific language. But the effect is real. The procedure changed something in you. The underground sounds are becoming clearer, closer, more human. One observer suddenly points toward the tunnel. Something is moving there again, slowly. The gaslight catches shapes briefly between the support pillars deeper below. More than one. Not clearly visible, only fragments. A shoulder, a hand, a face disappearing behind brick, then gone. The observers recoil immediately. One assistant begins praying under his breath. The doctor grabs his arm sharply. "Stop that!" The assistant stares at him in disbelief. They hear patterns. Patterns, not words, patterns, as though the things below react differently to rhythm and sound after restoration. The assistant falls silent immediately. But now, another question opens inside the chamber. What exactly happened beneath the third gate? The doctor walks toward a heavy control panel fixed near the wall. Brass switches line the surface beside pressure gauges and current meters. Several needles are trembling violently now. One gauge reads dangerously high. Another barely moves at all. The doctor adjusts a dial carefully. The humming beneath the floor deepens. Immediately, the sounds below the rails grow quieter. Not gone, subdued. One observer stares at the gauges. "The field is weakening." "Not yet," the doctor replies. "Not yet." The phrase carries exhaustion now, as though he has been fighting this problem alone for months or years. Victorian history remembers great inventions proudly. Steam locomotives, telegraphs, electric lighting, surgical anesthesia. But history rarely remembers the inventions abandoned halfway through terror. The devices hidden quietly, the experiments sealed underground, the projects whose records disappeared into government archives or private fires. Not because they failed completely, because they succeeded incorrectly. The doctor studies the gauges again, then quietly says, "We need the central dynamo." Every observer reacts instantly. "No! We sealed that chamber. It's unstable." The doctor ignores them all. "The lower field will collapse without full current." Subject 13 closes his eyes weakly. "You should let it collapse." The doctor turns sharply. "And release them?" "Them, not it. Them." More than one. The chamber goes silent again. One observer whispers, "How many survived the restoration?" The doctor says nothing. Subject 13 answers instead. "Enough." No one asks another question after that, because sometimes a vague answer is more frightening than a number. The doctor moves toward you suddenly. "Release 47. The assistants hesitate. "Now!" The restraints around your wrists loosen. Blood rushes painfully back into your hands. You stumble slightly as your legs regain movement. The doctor grips your shoulder immediately. "You're coming with us." "Why?" "Because the induction altered your sensitivity." Sensitivity. Another harmless word hiding something terrible. You hear them sooner than the others. Your stomach tightens. The machine changed you, not visibly, inside. The doctor notices your fear. "That may keep us alive." Us. Now even he sounds uncertain. Another impact slams through the tunnel, closer, this time accompanied by something unmistakable. Voices. Not clear speech, fragments. Broken sounds overlapping each other in darkness. Human throats trying to remember language. One observer breaks completely. "I'm leaving." He rushes toward the stairs. The doctor grabs him violently before he reaches them. "If the field collapses above ground," he stops. Again, too late. The observer stares at him. "How far does it spread?" Silence. The doctor releases him slowly. No answer needed. The induction field does not protect only the laboratory. It protects London above it. Your blood runs cold. The buried invention beneath the city was never forgotten accidentally. It was hidden because shutting it down safely became impossible. Subject 13 suddenly grips the tunnel wall harder. His damaged eye widens slightly. "They're near the second gate." Every observer freezes. The doctor moves instantly toward a large iron lever near the rails. "What happens if they reach it?" asks one assistant. Subject 13 looks directly at him. "They remember stairs." The chamber erupts into panic. One observer rushes for tools. Another begins sealing instrument cases desperately. Steam fills the air from another damaged pipe. The doctor slams the iron lever downward. Deep below the rails, enormous gears begin turning slowly. Metal screams against metal. Then, a massive iron gate crashes shut somewhere underground. For several seconds, silence follows. Then the impacts begin again immediately, harder now, violent. Something below the third gate is trying to force its way upward. The doctor's face finally loses all certainty, because now the truth is undeniable. The restored subjects are no longer merely surviving. They are organizing. The gas lamps dim dangerously. Current meters tremble. The humming field weakens again. And then, from somewhere deep below London, a chorus of broken voices rises together through the tunnel. Not random this time, not fragmented, words, slow, damaged, but synchronized. "Open." The observers stare at the darkness in absolute horror. Again the voices rise, louder now. "Open." Subject 13's face drains of what little color remained, because he recognizes the sound before anyone else does, and when he finally speaks, his voice is barely audible. "They remember being buried." At that exact moment, the iron gate below slams once from the other side, hard enough to shake the entire underground laboratory. The buried choir. The gate below slams again, harder. Dust bursts from the tunnel ceiling. One of the gas lamps shatters overhead, spraying glass across the wet stone floor. Darkness swallows half the chamber instantly, leaving only trembling islands of yellow light between the steam pipes. And beneath it all, the voices continue. "Open." Slow, damaged, not shouted, pleaded. That somehow makes them worse, because rage is easier to survive than suffering. The observers retreat farther from the rails instinctively. One assistant is openly sobbing now while trying to gather papers from the workbench with shaking hands. The doctor ignores him completely. He stands beside the control panel, staring at the trembling current gauges, like a man trying to stop a flood using mathematics. "The induction field is collapsing faster than expected," he mutters. Subject 13 laughs weakly from the tunnel entrance. "You kept waking them." The doctor does not answer, because there is no defense left. The chamber already knows the truth. The invention did not create monsters. It created prisoners. And tonight, the prisoners remember enough to want out. Another impact crashes through the gate below. Metal groans. The rails vibrate beneath your boots. You realize suddenly how enormous the underground system must be. Not one chamber, not one tunnel. A network, built secretly beneath London over years, perhaps decades. How many men vanished into it? How many subjects were declared dead before being lowered beneath the city for restoration trials? Victorian London swallowed missing people easily, especially poor ones. Workhouse laborers, factory workers, prison convicts, patients without families, bodies from overcrowded hospitals. No one asked too many questions when the desperate disappeared. And hidden beneath all that misery, someone built a machine designed to interrupt death itself. The doctor suddenly looks toward you. 47. The number sounds strange now. Less like identification, more like recruitment. You said the machine heightened your auditory sensitivity during induction. You nod slowly. "I need you to listen." Another slam shakes the chamber. The observers stare at him in disbelief. "You cannot be serious," one whispers. The doctor ignores him. "Tell me how many voices you hear." Your stomach tightens, because part of you already knows the answer. The induction changed something. The underground sounds no longer blur together. They separate now, individual, distinct, like hearing distant conversations through walls. You close your eyes slowly. Steam hisses, pipes rattle. The gate groans beneath repeated impacts. And underneath all of it, voices. Many voices. Some weak, some furious, some confused, some crying. You hear coughing, scraping nails, prayers, fragments of names. One voice repeating numbers endlessly, another begging for light. Your eyes open immediately. "How many?" the doctor asks. You stare at him. "Too many." That answer changes the room. Because now the observers understand something horrifying. The lower chambers contain far more restored subjects than they were told. One observer backs toward the stairs again. "You lied to us." The doctor snaps back instantly. "I preserved them." Preserved. Not saved, not healed. Preserved. Like specimens. Like organs floating in jars. Like something maintained rather than lived. Subject 13 steps farther into the light now. The observers recoil instinctively. His damaged face twitches slightly whenever the deeper impacts strike the gate below, almost as if his body reacts to the others automatically. A connection. The doctor notices it too. "You still respond to the field." Subject 13 looks at him with exhausted hatred. "No," he whispers. "I respond to them." The doctor says nothing. That silence becomes another answer. The restored subjects are linked somehow. Not telepathically, not fantasy. Something worse. Shared conditioning. Shared induction. Shared memory pathways altered by the machine. Victorian researchers obsessed over invisible systems connecting human bodies. Nerves. Electrical conduction. Reflex arcs. Some scientists believe the body itself was little more than biological wiring waiting to be understood properly. Most experiments remained harmless theories. But hidden beneath London, someone pushed the theory too far. Another violent slam erupts below. This time the gate bends visibly inward. One assistant screams. The doctor grabs the control lever immediately and forces more current into the system. The underground hum deepens. Lights brighten painfully. The impacts stop. For 3 seconds. Then resume again. Stronger. Because now the thing below is fighting the restraint consciously. One observer whispers, "They're learning." The doctor finally looks afraid again. Not because the subjects survived, because they adapted. Tonight you are the man standing inside the moment an invention stops behaving like a machine and starts behaving like a species. Steam pours through the chamber thicker now. Visibility drops. The observers move through drifting white clouds like ghosts inside factory smoke. And somewhere below the gate, the voices begin changing. No longer random, no longer pleading. Rhythmic, together, as though the subjects beneath the city are synchronizing somehow. Subject 13 hears it first. His expression tightens immediately. They're remembering each other. The doctor turns sharply. That should not be possible. Subject 13 stares at him. "You connected us." The words hit harder than the impacts below, because suddenly the entire nightmare makes sense. The memory machine, the induction coils, the emotional amplification, the shared current network beneath the laboratory. The subjects were never restored individually. They were linked through the system itself. And now the underground chamber contains minds damaged enough to suffer, but connected enough to organize. The doctor walks slowly toward the tunnel entrance again despite the danger, obsession still pulling him forward. He raises the caged lamp high. 13, he says quietly. "Can they still reason?" Subject 13 gives a weak smile. "That's the problem." Another slam shakes the gate. A crack appears along one side of the metal frame. The observers panic instantly. "It's failing. We need to leave. We need to destroy the lower dynamo." The doctor turns toward them violently. "If the dynamo stops completely..." Again, he stops himself too late. The observer with spectacles stares at him. "What happens?" The doctor's silence stretches too long. Finally, he says quietly, "The field suppresses higher motor recovery." No one understands immediately. Then Subject 13 answers for him. "It keeps us slow." The chamber goes dead silent, because now everyone realizes the full horror. The current was never trying to wake the subjects completely. It was deliberately holding them in a weakened state, half alive, half restrained, aware enough to suffer, too damaged to escape. Until now. The crack along the gate widens slightly with another impact. Steam bursts from the hinges, and suddenly, one of the voices below becomes clear enough to understand fully. "Cold!" Another voice joins it. "Dark!" Then another. "Please!" The chamber freezes, because they're not speaking like monsters. They're speaking like buried patients. Victorian history contains real stories of premature burial terror. Coffins fitted with bells, escape tubes, breathing pipes, safety graves. Doctors terrified of declaring death too early. The public feared waking underground. But hidden beneath London the fear became real in another way entirely. Not buried alive, restored alive after burial. The doctor grips the tunnel wall hard enough for his knuckles to whiten. For the first time tonight, he finally looks old. Not brilliant, not visionary. Old. A man who carried an invention too far and no longer knows how to stop it. Subject 13 studies him silently. "You wanted memory to survive death," he says softly. The doctor closes his eyes briefly. "You don't understand what was possible." "No," replies Subject 13, "you didn't." Another slam. The gate bends farther inward. Metal shrieks. One observer runs for the stairs completely now. The doctor does not stop him this time, perhaps because part of him already knows escape is impossible. You suddenly hear something else beneath the voices, a pattern. Footsteps, not chaotic anymore, organized, climbing. Your blood turns cold. "They found stairs," you whisper. Every face in the chamber turns toward you instantly. The doctor steps closer. "How many?" You listen again. The induction sharpened your hearing too much now. The underground sounds feel painfully close. You hear wet shoes on iron steps, hands dragging against rails, breathing. Many bodies moving upward together, and beneath all of it, one voice guiding the others. Slow, damaged, repeating the same phrase again and again. Up. Subject 13 hears it too. His expression changes instantly. Fear, real fear, because he recognizes the voice leading them. "The first subject," he whispers. The doctor's face drains completely. "Impossible. The first subject died years ago, unless..." The doctor staggers backwards slightly, and suddenly you understand the final hidden horror beneath the laboratory. Subject 13 was not the oldest restoration, only the first one they failed to erase. Something older still exists below the third gate. Something restored before the numbering system even began. The lights dim sharply. Current gauges drop. The underground hum weakens dangerously. Then, the massive iron gate finally begins to open inward, slowly. Bent metal peeling back under pressure from dozens of hands below. Steam floods upward through the widening crack, and from the darkness beneath London, someone begins climbing toward the chamber. The first restoration. The gate opens another inch. Bent iron screams against the rails. Steam pours upward from the darkness below, thick enough to swallow the lower tunnel entirely. The gas lamps flicker weakly through the white haze, turning the underground chamber into something dreamlike and sick. No one moves. No one breathes loudly. Because every person in the room understands the same thing now. Something is climbing toward them. Not rushing, not attacking blindly, climbing with purpose, slow, controlled, remembering. The doctor stares at the widening gap beneath the gate with an expression you have not yet seen on his face tonight. Recognition. Not surprise, not confusion, recognition. As though he already knows exactly who waits below. Subject 13 sees it too. "You never destroyed him," he whispers. The doctor says nothing. That silence confirms everything. One observer backs away from the tunnel, shaking his head repeatedly. "This was never one experiment." No, it was not. This place beneath London was built layer by layer over years, one invention leading to another, one success demanding another test, one restored subject becoming justification for the next, until the underground chambers filled with people too altered to release and too aware to ignore. Victorian history often celebrated invention without showing the hidden rooms behind it. Factories displayed finished machines. Hospitals displayed successful procedures. Exhibitions displayed polished miracles beneath electric lights. But nobody displayed the failures breathing beneath the floorboards. Tonight you are standing where history buried them instead. Another metallic impact shakes the gate, then a hand appears through the opening, not clawing wildly, reaching carefully upward. The chamber recoils instinctively. Even the doctor steps backward this time. The hand grips the bent iron slowly. The skin is pale beneath old burn scars. Thin copper wires disappear beneath the wrist like surgical veins left inside the flesh. And unlike Subject 13, the hand barely trembles, controlled, steady. That frightens you most, because stability suggests time, practice, adaptation. The thing below has existed long enough to learn control again. One observer whispers, "How old is it?" The doctor finally answers, 12 years. The room goes silent. 12 years. 12 years beneath London. 12 years of restoration procedures, induction fields, containment systems, memory experiments, and buried subjects hidden beneath the city streets. 12 years of something surviving that should never have continued beyond a single night. The hand tightens around the iron gate. Then another hand appears beside it, and slowly, a face rises into the gaslight. Every observer freezes completely. The first restoration looks less damaged than Subject 13. That somehow makes him worse. The skin is pale but intact. Thin scars trace across the temples where old induction contacts once rested. His hair hangs wet against his forehead. The eyes are sunken but horribly alert. Too alert. Like someone who has spent years thinking in darkness. One observer makes a strangled sound in his throat. Because the face emerging from below does not resemble a monster. It resembles a patient. A tired patient climbing from underground. The first restoration blinks slowly against the gaslight, then looks directly at the doctor. Not confused, not animalistic, aware. "You changed the current again," he says quietly. His voice is damaged but stable, human. That stability terrifies the chamber more than screaming ever could. The doctor grips the control panel beside him. "You should not be above the third gate." The first restoration gives a faint smile. "You always say that." That sentence reveals history immediately. Conversations, repeated encounters, years of interaction hidden beneath the laboratory. The observers stare at the doctor in horror now, because they finally understand he did not merely study the restored subjects. He lived with them, maintained them, spoke to them, listened to them. The first restoration pulls himself fully through the opening. Behind him, deeper in the steam-filled darkness below, shapes move slowly beneath the gaslight. Others, waiting, watching. The doctor notices your eyes moving toward the shadows. "Do not look behind him," he says sharply. But that only guarantees everyone does. More faces flicker briefly in the steam below, burned, pale, bandaged, watching silently from beneath London. Not dead, not living properly, remembering together. The first restoration steps carefully into the chamber. His movements are slow but unnervingly precise. Every observer backs away instinctively except the doctor. Subject 13 lowers his head slightly. Not submission, recognition, perhaps even fear. "You should have let us fade," Subject 13 whispers. The first restoration looks at him quietly. "We tried." The room becomes colder somehow after that sentence, because it reveals the true horror beneath the invention. The restored subjects did not continue existing by choice. The machine prevented them from finishing. The doctor studies the first restoration intensely. "You retained higher cognition longer than projected." Projected. Even now he cannot stop speaking like a scientist. The first restoration smiles faintly again. "You projected too little." Another figure shifts below the gate in the steam. One observer panics immediately. "There are too many." The doctor raises his voice sharply. "They cannot remain stable above the field." The first restoration turns toward him slowly. "You still believe stability matters?" That sentence unsettles the doctor visibly, because obsession kept him working all these years under the assumption that success meant control. But what if the restorations no longer care about becoming normal again? The first restoration studies the underground chamber carefully. The machines, the rails, the observers. Finally, his eyes settle on you, number 47. He notices the fresh induction burns immediately. "They use the memory frame," not a question. You say nothing. He nods slightly. It becomes louder afterward. You realize he means the voices, the underground sounds, the connected awareness. The induction did not sharpen hearing. It connected perception. The doctor steps closer suddenly. "How many still respond below?" The first restoration looks at him with something almost resembling pity. "You still count us like equipment." "How many?" The first restoration glances toward the darkness behind the gate, then quietly says, "Enough to remember your name." The observers visibly pale, because that sentence means the subjects below retain more than fragments. They retain identity, recognition, grievance. The doctor grips the control panel harder. You're destabilizing the others by leaving the lower section. The first restoration looks genuinely confused by the statement. No, he replies softly. You destabilized them when you taught them fear. The words strike harder than the gate impacts ever did. Because suddenly, everything beneath London makes terrible sense. The memory experiments amplified trauma. The restoration process preserved suffering. The connected induction field allowed that suffering to spread between subjects. The underground chambers became filled with minds unable to die properly, sharing fear with each other for years. Tonight, you are the man standing inside the moment. A hidden Victorian invention finally reveals the cost of its own success. The first restoration steps farther into the chamber now. The observers retreat immediately. One assistant accidentally bumps the pressure apparatus beside Subject 31's chair. The restored body strapped there twitches weakly again. The first restoration notices instantly. His face changes. Pain. Real pain. You're still using the pressure chambers. The doctor says nothing. That was the worst part, whispers the first restoration. One observer asks carefully, what happened in the pressure trials? The first restoration turns toward him slowly. For several seconds he says nothing. Then, they discovered consciousness survives longer than breathing. The chamber falls silent. Not one observer writes now, because the sentence is too horrible to reduce into notes. The first restoration continues quietly. The heart stopped first. Steam drifts through the chamber around him. The lungs stop next. Another figure moves behind the gate below, watching. But awareness, he closes his eyes briefly. Awareness stayed. The observers look sick. One assistant begins praying openly now. No one stops him. Because the worst fear in Victorian medicine was never pain alone. It was awareness without escape. Patients restrained during surgery before anesthesia. Victims buried alive. Asylum inmates trapped inside failing minds. And beneath London, hidden behind electrical machinery and scientific language, men remained conscious after their bodies should have finished dying. The doctor suddenly steps toward the first restoration. You told me to continue. The chamber freezes. The first restoration looks genuinely tired now. Yes, he says quietly, because I thought it would end eventually. The doctor says nothing, because now his obsession stands exposed completely. He continued the experiments partly because the first subject begged him to, not for progress, for release. The gate below groans again. More faces appear in the darkness, watching silently upward. The first restoration hears them immediately. They're frightened. The doctor looks toward the tunnel. Of what? The first restoration turns slowly toward him. You. That answer lands harder than every impact tonight, because it means the underground subjects no longer see the doctor as creator or savior, only jailer. The current gauges suddenly dip sharply. The hum beneath the chamber weakens. Every restored subject below reacts instantly. The voices rise together again beneath the tunnel. Not violent this time, afraid. The first restoration looks toward the tunnel immediately. The field is failing. The doctor moves to the control panel in panic. We need the central dynamo now. Subject 13 shakes his head weakly. No more current. If the field collapses, they deserve to finish. The doctor rounds on him violently. They deserve life. The first restoration looks at the doctor for a very long time, then quietly says the sentence that finally breaks whatever certainty remained inside the chamber. This isn't life anymore. Silence. Pure silence. The gas lamps flicker weakly overhead. Steam drifts across the rails, and beneath London, the buried subjects continue whispering together in the dark. Not monsters, not experiments. People trapped between death and memory. The doctor stares at the failing gauges desperately, because now he faces the truth he avoided for 12 years. The invention worked. And that is exactly why it had to disappear. Then suddenly, all the lights in the lower chamber dim at once. The underground hum collapses into silence. And from below the tunnel, dozens of voices inhale sharply together in the dark. The knocking beneath the floor. The silence after the hum dies is worse than the noise ever was. No pipes, no induction current, no vibrating machinery beneath the chamber, only breathing. Dozens of breaths rising slowly from the tunnel below. Human breaths. The gas lamps dim to weak orange embers along the walls. Steam drifts low across the rails like fog rolling over graves. And somewhere in the darkness beneath London, something begins climbing again. Not violently now, calmly. The first restoration closes his eyes. "You should run," he whispers. No one moves, because everyone finally understands the truth. There is nowhere left to run underground. The doctor stands frozen beside the dead control panel. His hands remain resting against the switches, even though the gauges have already fallen lifeless. 12 years of obsession, gone silent in seconds. One observer whispers carefully, "Can the field restart?" The doctor does not answer immediately. When he finally speaks, his voice sounds older. The dynamo flooded during the collapse. Flooded. So even the machinery beneath London has begun failing physically. Perhaps the city itself is trying to bury the invention at last. Another breath rises from below the tunnel. Closer. Then another. The restored subjects are climbing without the field now. Not restrained, not slowed. Free. Subject 13 grips the wall hard enough for his damaged fingers to shake. "You waited too long." The doctor stares at the dark tunnel. "I was trying to save them." The first restoration looks at him sadly. "No," he says quietly. "You were trying to undo death." That sentence settles through the chamber like dust after an explosion. Because now everything becomes clear. The machines, the pressure chambers, the memory induction, the hidden laboratories, the numbered subjects, the buried tunnels beneath London. None of it was ever about medicine alone. It was grief wearing the face of science. The doctor turns slowly toward the first restoration. For the first time tonight, the obsession cracks completely, and beneath it, something human finally appears. Exhaustion. Regret. "You think I wanted this?" he asks softly. The first restoration says nothing. The doctor looks toward the motionless body of subject 31 strapped to the chair. "When I began the restoration trials, children were dying in cholera wards before their mothers could reach them." His voice remains calm. Too calm. Men suffocated in factory collapses while surgeons stood helpless beside them. Steam curls around the chamber floor. Patients disappeared during surgery because pain stopped the heart before the knife finished its work. He touches the dead control panel lightly. And electricity changed everything. The observers listen silently now. Because for the first time, the doctor is no longer speaking like a scientist. He is speaking like a man who truly believed he was helping. "Galvanic response proved the body remained active after death," he continues quietly. "Memory induction proved awareness persisted longer than breathing." His eyes drift toward the tunnel. "So I asked the question no one else would ask." The first restoration finishes it for him. "How long can suffering survive?" The doctor closes his eyes. Because that was the real invention. Not resurrection. Continuation. The chamber trembles lightly again. Not from machinery now. Footsteps. Many footsteps. Wet shoes climbing stone stairs below the tunnel. The restored subjects are near. And tonight, you are finally back at the beginning. The knocking beneath the floor, the sound that started everything. The sound you heard while strapped to the chair upstairs before you understood what lived below the laboratory. Now you know. Not pipes, not machinery, people. People buried beneath London by a forgotten invention that refused to let them die properly. The first restoration steps closer to the tunnel entrance slowly. The figures below are becoming visible now through the steam, shapes moving upward together beneath the weak gaslight. One observer begins sobbing openly. Another kneels beside the wall, whispering prayers into shaking hands. No one stops them anymore, because science has ended here. Only consequences remain. The doctor suddenly turns toward you. 47. You hate how quickly you answer now. Yes. The induction changed your auditory pathways. Even now he uses clinical language to steady himself. You hear them clearly. You nod slowly. The footsteps below continue rising. Tell me something, he says quietly. You listen. The sounds are painfully sharp now. Every cough, every dragging step, every broken breath. But beneath all of it, another sound exists. Soft, rhythmic. You freeze. The doctor sees it immediately. What? You stare toward the tunnel. They're knocking. The first restoration closes his eyes again. Of course they are. The rhythm rises from below together now. Knock, knock, knock. Not random, not violent, intentional. The exact same sound you heard beneath the chair in the opening moments of the night. The return. Hook finally closes around you completely, because now you understand what the knocking meant. Not warning, communication. The buried subjects were trying to answer each other through the pipes and rails beneath London, trying to prove they were still aware, still trapped, still there. The doctor hears it too now without the machine, and something inside him finally breaks. He whispers, "My God." The first restoration looks at him quietly. They were afraid of being forgotten. That sentence hits harder than every horror in the chamber, because suddenly the restored subjects become something even more terrible than monsters. Witnesses. Living evidence buried beneath the city so history could continue pretending progress remained clean. Victorian society loved inventions when they stayed beautiful. Electric lights, railways, medical breakthroughs. But hidden beneath those triumphs were rooms like this. Rooms where desperate people paid the price of discovery. The footsteps reached the lower section of the tunnel. Shapes emerged slowly through the steam, one by one, not charging, not attacking, walking. The restored subjects look ruined, but unmistakably human. Burned skin, sunken eyes, bandaged throats, copper induction scars along temples and necks. Some limp badly, some tremble constantly. One clutches a ruined arm against his chest. Another drags one leg behind him. But all of them are aware, and all of them are looking at the doctor. Not with hunger, with memory. The observers recoil against the walls in terror, but the restored subjects ignore them completely. They care only about the doctor, the man who kept them alive beneath London, or trapped them there, perhaps both. The first restoration steps slightly forward between the doctor and the others, protecting him, or protecting them from him. It becomes hard to tell. One restored subject near the back whispers weakly, "Cold." Another, "Dark." Another, "Hurts." The same phrases you heard beneath the field earlier, not monstrous speech, pain repeating endlessly through damaged memory. The doctor's face collapses inward slowly as he listens, because now the consequences of 12 years stand before him fully conscious. Tonight, you're the man watching a forgotten Victorian invention finally reveal its real cost, face to face. One restored subject near the tunnel wall suddenly notices the stairs leading upward, toward London, toward the city above. The doctor sees it instantly. Fear returns to him immediately. If they leave this place, the first restoration interrupts quietly. They won't. The doctor stares at him. Why? The first restoration looks toward the weak gaslights overhead, toward the failing machines, toward the damp walls and steam, toward the underground prison that became their entire world. Then finally says, "Because there's nowhere for us above ground anymore." Silence follows, long, heavy. One restored subject begins knocking softly against the wall beside him again. Knock, knock, knock. Others slowly join him. The rhythm spreads quietly through the chamber until the entire underground room fills with soft human knocking, like prisoners answering each other through coffin lids. The doctor's eyes fill suddenly, not dramatically, not theatrically, just exhaustion finally becoming visible. "You remember everything?" he asks the first restoration. The answer comes quietly. "Enough." The doctor lowers his head, and for the first time since entering the laboratory, he looks ashamed. The knocking continues softly through the chamber, the same knocking from the opening scene. The mystery is no longer mystery now, only tragedy buried beneath machinery and scientific language. The doctor stares toward the dark rails disappearing deeper below London, then quietly asks the question he has probably feared for years. "Do you hate me?" The first restoration studies him silently for a very long time, then finally answers, "No." That surprises everyone, even the doctor. The first restoration looks toward the restored subjects around him. "You were afraid too." The chamber falls silent again, because perhaps that was the final truth hidden beneath the invention. Not evil, fear. Fear of death, fear of loss. fear strong enough to turn brilliant men into architects of suffering. The restored subjects continue knocking softly together beneath the gaslights, and somewhere above the underground chamber, London continues sleeping peacefully, never knowing what history buried beneath its streets. The invention history buried. The knocking continues softly through the chamber. Knock, knock, knock. Not violent anymore. Not desperate. Almost gentle now. Like exhausted people proving to each other that they are still there. Steam drifts beneath the gaslights in pale ribbons. Water drips steadily from cracked pipes into the flooded channels along the floor. Somewhere above the underground chamber, carriage wheels continue crossing the London streets without pause. The city has no idea what breathes beneath it, and perhaps it never will. The restored subjects stand silently throughout the chamber now, no longer climbing, no longer trying to escape, simply gathered together at last after years underground. One sits weakly against the wall near the tunnel entrance. Another stares upward toward the ceiling as if trying to remember sunlight. A third gently touches the copper scars along his neck, like someone feeling the remains of old chains. The first restoration watches them quietly, not leading them, watching over them. The doctor remains beside the dead control panel. His shoulders seem smaller now. 12 years of obsession reduced finally to silence and steam. "You can restart the dynamo," one observer whispers carefully. The doctor does not answer immediately. The suggestion hangs in the room like smoke. Restart the field. Restore containment. Continue the system. Bury the invention again. The doctor studies the restored subjects slowly. One coughing weakly into blood-stained cloth. One whispering forgotten prayers. One still knocking softly against the brick wall. None of them look dangerous now, only tired. Tired beyond ordinary exhaustion. Tired in the way only prolonged suffering can make a human being tired. The first restoration finally speaks. "If you restart the current," the doctor looks up, "we stay like this." No accusation, no anger, just truth. The doctor lowers his eyes, because now he understands the final failure of the invention. The machine could interrupt death, but it could not restore peace. Victorian science often dreamed of defeating nature completely, stopping disease, conquering distance, controlling pain, perhaps even defeating death itself. But hidden beneath London, one invention discovered something terrible. There are states worse than dying. Tonight you are the man standing inside the grave of that discovery. One observer near the stairs suddenly says quietly, "What happens if we do nothing?" The chamber falls silent. The doctor knows the answer. So does the first restoration. Finally, the doctor speaks. "The remaining current in the system will dissipate naturally." One observer swallows hard. "And then?" The doctor looks toward the restored subjects, toward the copper scars, the weakened breathing, the exhausted eyes. They will finish dying. No one moves afterward, not even the restored subjects. Because after everything hidden beneath London, after the experiments, the memory induction, the pressure chambers, the years underground, the answer is horrifyingly simple. The invention can end only by allowing death to continue. The first restoration walks slowly toward the doctor. The chamber watches both men carefully. Creator, subject, scientist, victim, two men destroyed by the same fear. The first restoration stops beside him. "You were trying to save people," he says quietly. The doctor laughs once beneath his breath. A broken sound. "I was trying to save myself." There it is. The truth beneath all the machinery. Not ambition alone, not government funding, not scientific glory. Grief, fear, mortality. The doctor finally looks toward you, toward number 47, toward the newest witness to the buried history beneath London. "When my wife died," he says softly, "her heart stopped before the surgeon arrived." The observers stared at him. Perhaps none of them knew. She was conscious at the end. Steam drifts across the floor between the gaslights. She knew she was dying. The doctor's voice weakens slightly. "And afterward, I could not stop thinking about one question." He looks toward the silent machines. What if awareness remained longer than the body? The chamber understands now. The first restoration understands most of all. Because every horror beneath London began with a man terrified of helpless death. The doctor continues quietly. The first galvanic trials gave movement to dead tissue. His eyes drift toward the tunnel. Then came memory induction. Then respiratory restoration. Then pressure continuation. Every step logical by itself, every step understandable. And together, they created a hidden grave beneath the city, filled with people unable to finish dying. The first restoration studies him silently. You should have stopped after me. Yes, the doctor does not deny it anymore. But you spoke. That sentence changes the tragedy again, because the first restoration did the worst possible thing for a grieving scientist. He proved the invention worked. Not correctly, not mercifully, but enough. Enough to keep obsession alive for 12 more years underground. One restored subject near the wall suddenly stops knocking. The chamber notices immediately. The man lowers his hand slowly, then exhales once, and does not inhale again. No violence, no collapse, only stillness. The first real stillness you have seen tonight. One observer steps forward carefully to check him, then quietly nods. Gone. The first restoration watches without fear, almost relief. Another restored subject closes their eyes nearby, then another. The weakening current is already releasing them, not dramatically, gently, like the tide slowly leaving a shore. The doctor grips the edge of the control panel hard enough for his hands to shake. He could still restart it. Everyone in the room knows that. The dynamo chamber may be flooded, but not destroyed entirely. Enough current could probably be forced back into the system to prolong the restorations again. More years underground, more memory, more suffering. The first restoration sees the thought pass through the doctor's face. Slowly, he reaches out and places one scarred hand over the doctor's trembling fingers. Not anger, not revenge, mercy. You have to let us go. The doctor closes his eyes, and finally, after 12 years beneath London, he steps away from the controls. The chamber exhales quietly together, not in triumph, in release. The restored subjects begin settling slowly throughout the room as the remaining current fades weaker and weaker through the pipes. Some lean against walls, some sit beside the rails. One continues whispering numbers softly until the voice fades away mid-sentence. Subject 13 lowers himself carefully beside the tunnel entrance. You should leave now, he says to you. Not because they are dangerous anymore, because this place is ending. The observers begin moving toward the stairs silently. No one takes notes now, no one gathers instruments. History is being buried again in real time. The doctor remains standing alone in the center of the chamber, watching the machines lose power one by one. The pressure gauges fall, the induction coils darken, the humming disappears completely, and beneath London, the buried invention finally begins to die. Tonight you are the man who heard the knocking beneath the floor and discovered what history hid there. Not monsters, not immortality, only suffering prolonged by fear of death. The first restoration looks toward the doctor one last time. You were afraid to lose people. The doctor nods weakly. Yes. The first restoration's damaged face softens slightly. So were we. The gas lamps flicker lower, steam fades, silence spreads slowly through the chamber as more restored subjects finally become still. No screams, no violence, only exhaustion ending. The doctor sinks slowly into the chair beside the dead machines, not fighting anymore, not calculating anymore, just an old man underground beside the invention that consumed his life. You climb the stairs at last with the others, step by step, leaving the chamber below, leaving the rails, leaving the buried voices. But halfway up you stop once more, because beneath the fading sounds of the laboratory, you hear one final knock. Soft, distant, knock, knock, knock. Not frightening now, almost human, almost grateful. Then silence, true silence this time, permanent. When you finally emerge onto the London street above, dawn is beginning to rise through the fog. Milk carts move through the narrow roads, newspapers are being unloaded, factory whistles echo across the rooftops. Ordinary life continues exactly as it did before. No one looks at you twice. No one knows what existed beneath their feet all these years. And within a few decades, the laboratory will disappear completely. The tunnels flooded, the machinery dismantled, the records destroyed or hidden. The invention, buried so deeply in history that Most people will never hear of it again. Only fragments will survive, strange patents, missing files, rumors of electrical restoration, whispers about forgotten Victorian experiments. And somewhere beneath the streets of London, behind sealed brick and flooded rails, the earth still remembers the men who knocked beneath the floor. This is not a horror story. This is history.